Chapter 1. Becky Brown sank down onto the single bed in her room in the boarding house where she'd lived since her parents had kicked her out 6 months before. She'd made one mistake, albeit a huge life-changing mistake, and they'd let her know it was unforgivable in their eyes. She patted her belly, wishing the baby would hurry and come before removing her shoes and rubbing her feet. Waiting tables when you were 8 months pregnant wasn't ideal, but there was no choice in the matter. Her fiancé had died the week before the wedding and left her pregnant. She knew she shouldn't have anticipated the marriage vows, but it had only happened once. Of course, once was enough. She couldn't regret the baby she had growing inside her. It was a living reminder of Cliff, a man she had loved with everything inside her. He'd been her sweetheart for years, and they'd finally set a wedding date. Tears sprang to her eyes as she thought of him the way she'd last seen him, laid out in his coffin. Her heart would never be the same again. Becky curled her feet under her, thankful she was able to reach her feet still. She knew many women weren't able to when their pregnancy was as advanced as hers was. All the rubbing in the world wasn't going to make them feel normal, but at least they felt a little better. She arched her back and stretched for a moment before reaching down to put her shoes right back on her feet. She received a discount on her room if she helped cook and serve supper every night, so that's exactly what she did. As the only woman living there other than Mrs. Franklin, the owner, it put up an invisible barrier between her and the men as well. Leaving her room, Becky locked the door and headed downstairs to help cook and serve. She'd already put in 8 hours waiting tables, but that wasn't nearly enough if she wanted to be able to clothe and feed her baby. She had no idea who would watch the child when it arrived, but she had to figure something out. Being an unwed mother in the town of Creede, Colorado was not a position to be envied. She walked into the kitchen, wanting to fall on her knees and beg for the evening off, but she knew better. As kindly as Mrs. Franklin was, she would still expect Becky to do her share of the work. It was the arrangement they'd made that allowed Becky to live there at half rent after all. When she reported to the kitchen, Mrs. Franklin was waiting for her, ready to give her assignments. Set the table for 8 tonight. We have a new boarder. Handsome young man who is here for the rebuilding of Creede. Becky smirked at the idea that Mrs. Franklin felt the need to tell her the man was handsome. It wasn't like anyone would look at her in her condition. I'll set the table for 8. Supper smells good. Mrs. Franklin usually had the bulk of the meal ready by the time Becky came down to help. Sometimes she had her peel potatoes or make something small, but usually it was ready, and she just had to help serve and set the table. When she walked into the formal dining room, where they all ate supper every night, she saw a man who was a stranger to her. She smiled, not meeting his eyes. Hello. I'm Becky. I'm Amos. Do you live here? Becky nodded. I'm the only female guest here. I help Mrs. Franklin with the meals and such. She didn't mention the discount it got her, because that was no one's business but her own. That's nice. Amos's eyes fell to her stomach, and he frowned. She was a beautiful girl, and he'd hoped he could get to know her better. Someone had obviously beaten him to her. Where's your husband, ma'am? She frowned, considering not answering truthfully for the first time since Cliff had died. I'm not married. My fiancé died a week before our wedding was supposed to take place. Cliff had been one of the miners, and she missed him daily, but he'd left her in a pretty pickle. I see. He studied her for a moment. It can't be easy to have a child on your own. I'm sure it won't be, Becky said, carefully putting the plates on the table and setting the silverware beside it. What she did at home was very similar to her job at the restaurant waiting tables. I'll have to find out, won't I? You should marry. It would make your life easier. She laughed, the sound of it harsh even to her own ears. Who would want me in this condition? Soon I'll have a child. No man wants a woman with a baby. He studied her for a moment, his head tilted to one side. I'm not sure you're right about that, Miss Brown. Becky Brown. I have a feeling you're wrong. A beautiful young girl like you has her whole life ahead of her. I think there are plenty of men who would be thrilled to have you for a bride. Like you, for instance? Becky wasn't sure what made her so bold, but she was tired of being told her life wasn't in ruins because she was pregnant. She knew better. Why, her own parents had kicked her out, and Cliff's parents had wanted nothing to do with her. Amos frowned for a moment before nodding. Yes, someone like me. She said nothing else as she finished setting the table and turned back to go to the kitchen. As she started to leave, he said, "Meet me in the parlor later. I'd like to get to know you better. I have to help with the dishes after supper." "After the dishes are done then." Amos watched her scurry away as fast as her very pregnant body would take her. He smiled to himself. She was just the kind of woman his mama had always been on him to marry. Maybe he could be married to her before his mama arrived with someone he had no intention of marrying, and she would be content to leave him alone after that. It was worth a try. Becky got into the kitchen, her eyes wide with surprise. "Amos just asked me to meet him in the parlor after we finish the dishes so he can get to know me better." Mrs. Franklin gave her a look that was pure glee. "I'm so glad there's a man in this town with a brain in his head. You're a beautiful young woman, even carrying that child. You should marry and have plenty more babies. Don't bury yourself in the grave with Cliff. I don't think he was ever good enough for you anyway." Becky sighed heavily. Mrs. Franklin had said that to her many times. She'd never really liked Cliff. Becky had known he was the man she'd marry from the time she was 9 years old, and Cliff had picked her flowers. He'd been the only man she'd ever loved. They'd anticipated their vows by 2 weeks. And he'd died a week later, leaving her a scarlet woman. "I'll talk to him, but I'm sure he's just playing games with me, Mrs. Franklin. A handsome man doesn't have to marry a woman who's already in the family way." "Maybe not, but he might see the prize right before his eyes and know it's what he should do." Mrs. Franklin handed her a platter with roast beef on it. "Be a dear and put that on the table for me." Becky was in and out of the kitchen 6 more times before supper, and she made sure she sat in the spot at the table that was closest to the kitchen so she could run for anything anyone needed throughout the meal. As soon as she was seated, Mrs. Franklin folded her hands over her belly and said grace. Her prayers were always fast, so her food wouldn't get cold. For the next hour, the only sounds were of the men at the table eating and asking for more food. When everyone had eaten their fill, Becky was on her feet once again, clearing away the dishes and filling the kitchen sink with hot water that had been boiling on the stove. Thankfully Mrs. Franklin had a water pump right there in the kitchen, so water didn't need to be brought in from the outside and then heated. It could be pumped right there and heated on the stove. It made things so much easier. Mrs. Franklin wiped off the table while Becky started washing the dishes, and then she dried the dishes. They had been working together this way for more than 6 months, so both of them knew what was expected of them. There was very little need for talk as they moved in harmony. "Are you going to allow Mr. Bowen to court you?" Becky shrugged. "I doubt he really wants to. I'm not sure what he was thinking when he asked me to meet him in the parlor. Maybe he needs a housekeeper or something once he moves on from here." "I don't think so. I saw the way he was watching you during supper. He's very interested in you in the way a man is interested in a woman. He was not thinking of you as a potential housekeeper, I promise you that. I think you've lost your mind, Mrs. Franklin, but I love you anyway." The woman had been a second mother to her since she'd found out she was expecting. She was thrilled to have her on her side. Becky washed the last pot and handed it to the older woman, drying her hands on a towel that was lying on the counter. "I'm going to go see what he really wants." "Don't you go getting your hopes up. Too late." Mrs. Franklin replied, a fond smile on her lips. Becky smiled back, removing her apron and hanging it on the hook beside the door. "I'll tell you all about it at breakfast tomorrow." "Oh, that's right. Tomorrow's Saturday. Your day off." "Yes, but I need to see Hannah tomorrow. She's coming over to make sure I'm doing all right." Hannah was the new nurse in town, and she had an attack rooster named Bob, who followed her everywhere. "Good. I'm glad she's keeping an eye on you." Mrs. Franklin patted Becky's back as she left the kitchen. Becky took a deep breath outside the parlor before walking in to join Amos. He was sitting in an armchair, so she took the spot on the sofa perpendicular to him. What did you want to talk to me about? Amos eyed her carefully. Why aren't you living with your parents? That was the first thing he wanted to know because he didn't want to step on any toes. They asked me to leave as soon as they discovered I was expecting. Becky kept her chin up as she said the words. She wasn't pleased to be in her condition outside of marriage, but she loved Cliff, and she loved the child inside her with her whole heart. I expected as much. What about your fiancé's parents? Wouldn't they help you? She shook her head. They always thought my family was too uppity for them. They're a mining family, and my family owns a ranch outside town. Our families were never pleased that we were marrying to begin with. I see. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, looking into her eyes. I have a proposition for you, a bargain if you will. Becky frowned at him. What exactly are you proposing? I want you to marry me. The marriage will be in name only. My mother will be visiting next week, and I want to introduce her to my wife. I want her to think the baby is mine. It was the only reason he could come up with to get her to marry him. He wasn't sure why, but he knew she had to be a part of his life. And not just because of the strange man who'd been following him everywhere who no one else could see. But everyone in town knows better. They all know about Cliff. He frowned at that. The house I'm building is outside of town, and hopefully she won't hear about that. I've got it almost finished. I was living in another boarding house here in town, but one of the men there was involved in some things I didn't want to be around, so I came here. When will your house be finished? I plan to finish it Sunday evening. We could marry on Monday, and you could move in with me then. You'll have a room to yourself, except when my mother is visiting. I'll be a good father to your child. This is just to get my mother to leave me alone. If you ever fall in love in the future, I'll grant you your freedom. No problem. If I ever fall in love, I'd expect the same courtesy, but there's no worry about the child. It will be claimed by me, and I will always see to its well-being. Becky sat back heavily, her mind racing. So you want to marry on Monday? That's so soon. I don't think you have a whole lot of time to wait. He looked at her stomach pointedly. Besides, my mother arrives on Friday, and we're going to have to spend some time getting to know one another before she arrives. What exactly are you getting out of this bargain? She finally asked after mulling over the situation for a minute. I will get a wife who will keep my home clean and fix my meals for me. You will get a name for your baby and not have to work every minute of every day for a living to take care of him. What do you say? Amos watched her, sure she'd say yes. What woman in her position would turn him down? She needed him. And he needed her, though he didn't quite know why yet. Becky sighed. I'll do it. Amos grinned, standing up and pulling her to her feet. Now we have to kiss to seal the bargain. I thought you didn't plan to have a real marriage. Should you be touching me? I'm going to kiss you, Becky. Not make love to you on the sofa in Mrs. Franklin's parlor. Becky studied his face for just a moment, finally nodding at him. All right. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, ignoring the feelings that ignited within him. There. It's settled. Have your things ready to move out on Monday morning? He strode from the room, and Becky stood looking after him, her hand on her lips. His kiss. It was more potent than any Cliff had ever given her. What was she thinking, marrying this stranger? She sighed. She was thinking of the baby. Any kind of bargain would be worth it for the good of the baby. Amos sat in his room late into the night, wondering why he'd felt the need to marry her. He could easily fend off his mother's matchmaking as he'd done for years and years. Why did he think he needed to marry Becky? Oh, yes. She needed a husband, and he loved the idea of having a free housekeeper. It's more than that, and you know it. The man in jeans and a blue plaid shirt was there in his room again. It didn't even surprise him any longer. He'd been following him around since the day he'd set foot in Creed a year before. Who are you? Amos asked for what seemed to be the 1000th time. I told you, who I am doesn't matter. You need her in your life. You need her and that baby. Amos frowned. He knew the man was right. As soon as he'd seen Becky standing there, he knew she had to be his. Why was the question? I made it happen. We're getting married Monday morning. You think I don't know that? The man shook his head. Treat her with care. She's special. You think I don't know that? Amos responded. The man laughed and faded from sight. Amos thought once again about seeing the new town doctor for his hallucinations, but decided against it. He'd heard asylums were unpleasant places to be. Becky was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen in his life. He knew he wasn't making a mistake. He'd just have to convince his mother he was really in love with her. How hard could it be? Becky met Mrs. Franklin in the kitchen early the following morning, still a little confused about exactly what had happened the night before. Mrs. Franklin looked at her expectantly. Well? What did he want? He wants to make a bargain. He wants me to marry him and take care of his home. In exchange, he'll give the baby a name, and we'll have a place to stay. Becky didn't mention his mother coming to town because that was Amos's business, and she had no right to repeat it. Are you going to do it? Mrs. Franklin looked at her eagerly, her eyes almost begging Becky to give an affirmative answer. Becky nodded. It will get me out of the tight spot I'm in. I couldn't figure out how I was going to manage to raise this baby on my own. I have to work, and there would be no one to watch him. You know I'd have done it. Mrs. Franklin frowned at her. I know. But you do so much already, I don't think it would have been right to ask it of you. I don't want you to marry him simply because you think you won't have anyone to watch your baby. You will. Thank you, Mrs. Franklin. I appreciate your kind words, but I will marry him on Monday. It's what I need to do for me and my baby. Becky put her hand on her belly and stroked the child sheltered there. I think this is for the best. I do, too. Just remember I'm here if you need me. I will. Becky took a big platter of bacon and sausage and carried it to the table. I'll be back in just a minute. Mrs. Franklin watched her go with a tear in her eye. She'd never gotten so attached to one of her boarders, but Becky was special. Early Monday morning, Becky had her room packed up, and she'd given it an extra thorough cleaning so Mrs. Franklin wouldn't have to before another guest could move in. She had often helped with cleaning the rooms after one guest or another would move out, so she was comfortable with what needed to be done. She put fresh sheets on the bed and made it up the way Mrs. Franklin would have done it herself before walking down to find the older woman. My room is made up and ready for the next guest. Mrs. Franklin smiled at her, a tear popping into her eye. Thank you for thinking of that. It will save me work later. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Mrs. Franklin. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been willing to take me in when no one else wanted me. I still don't understand those parents of yours. You're their only child, and they just pushed you out of the house as if you were yesterday's slop. Promise you'll visit me? Becky flew into the woman's arms, hugging her tightly. I'll visit you every single chance I get. I promise. You're a sweet child. Mrs. Franklin hugged her back, finally stepping away to see the bag at Becky's feet. I'm always here for you. If you have the slightest need, you come see me. You understand? Becky wiped her own tears off her face. I promise, I will. Amos stopped beside them, noting the tears on both of their faces. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the pastor is expecting us in 10 minutes. Becky nodded, taking the arm Amos offered her. I'll miss you, she said softly. Mrs. Franklin nodded, wiping away her tears with her apron. She stood at the window and watched the two of them until they were out of sight, saying a quick prayer. God, you make him take care of her. She deserves all the love a man can give. As they walked, he turned into the small church there in Creed, and she knew she was going to have to be married by Pastor Eugene, who had once tried to get her to move out of town, because her being allowed to stay in her condition would make other young ladies think they could behave the same way she had. I don't like him, she said softly as they entered the church. Pastor Eugene? No one does, but unless we want to drive to Bachelor to get married, he's our only option. Amos wasn't particularly fond of the man, but they were headed out of town the opposite direction of Bachelor, and it would just add time to their already busy day. I understand. I'll deal with him. When they reached the front of the church and stood before the pastor, Eugene's eyes narrowed. Why are you bringing this Jezebel into the house of the Lord? Amos frowned at the pastor. You will marry us with as few words as you can possibly use, and then you may tell my bride that you're happy she found a man who will care for her and her child. Not another negative word, or I'll be the one gathering the next lynch mob myself. Becky bit a lip to keep from laughing when she saw the fear on Eugene's face. She'd heard stories about how the pastor had been found with his new wife, and she wasn't at all worried about anything he had to say about morality. She'd made a mistake, and she'd owned up to it. It was more than she could say for him. The wedding took less than 3 minutes. When Pastor Eugene said, "You may kiss your bride," Amos took her into his arms and kissed her softly. Once again, her lips tingled and feelings washed through her. How could she feel so much when she was just weeks away from delivering her child? "Thank you, Pastor," Amos said, shaking his hand. He slipped him the smallest amount of money he thought was reasonable for the service the man had performed. "We'll see you on Sunday." Amos offered her his arm and picked up her bag. Becky held her head high as she left the church, more than a little happy that they'd managed to get the wedding done so quickly. "Let's go see the house," he said softly. Chapter 2. The ride out of Creed and to Amos's house took them past Becky's parents' house, and she sat rigidly beside him on the seat of the wagon as they passed. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her mother in the front yard, watching her, but she refused to even turn her head. Too much water had passed under that bridge for her to feel comfortable discussing anything with her. Their new house was a scant 10-minute ride past her parents' ranch, and she wasn't looking forward to being so close to them. As they pulled up to his house, she was surprised at how grand it was. "It's beautiful." He grinned over at her, pleased by her reaction. "I still have a little work I want to do, but it's mostly done. I want to add a small barn, so we can have a couple of cows. Babies need milk, right?" She smiled at that. "Well, at first, they drink only their mama's milk, but soon he or she will need cow's milk. You'll definitely have time to build a barn first, and a chicken coop. I want us to be self-sufficient here as soon as we can be. For now, you'll have to shop in town, if that's all right." She nodded. There hadn't been many people who had been kind to her in town since she'd gotten pregnant, but the wife of the mercantile owner had been one of the few who had. She couldn't wait to tell Toria she was married. She knew the older woman would only be pleased for her. And Toria was expecting as well, so maybe their babies would one day be friends. He jumped down from the wagon and walked around, holding a hand up to help her down. "Easy does it. Can you get in and out of a wagon on your own now?" She laughed, nodding. "I've always been extremely active and flexible. Being pregnant hasn't changed that one bit. I do as much as I can every day of my life. I like being self-sufficient. It makes me more confident." "All right. Let's see our house." He couldn't believe how very excited he was to lead his new wife inside and show her the house he'd built. He opened the door, and the first thing she saw was a big parlor. There was one sofa there but no other furniture. "I'll give you a budget to buy what you need to furnish this room and some others. I was so worried about getting everything built that I didn't much think about the decor." "I can understand that. Looking around, I already have some ideas. Can we order furniture from the mercantile?" He shrugged. "As long as you stay within budget, I don't care if you order it from China. I wish we had a little more time before my mom gets here, but we don't, so you're just going to have to work fast." "I'll do my best." She walked to the middle of the room and thought about what she could do in the meantime. "How about if I make a few large pillows until we get more furniture in?" "That's fine. Or there's a small furniture store in town you can go to. They should deliver for you. I don't have time to go unless we do it today, but you can get what you want within budget." He led her into the kitchen, which he was sure she'd love. There was a table with 6 chairs pushed up to it. You should get a high chair as well. It'll look more realistic that I'm the baby's father that way. I'll do that. I should probably get a cradle, too. Absolutely. Just make sure the baby is taken care of when you buy things. He led her to the back of the house. There's one bedroom on the first floor. We'll share it while my mother is here, but it will be yours when she's not. You can share it with the baby after he arrives. He opened the door to a large bed, a dresser, and a wardrobe. It would be perfect for her. She could put the cradle at the foot of the bed. She wouldn't think about having to share the bed with him while his mother was there until absolutely necessary. This will work beautifully. Good. I was hoping it would. He led the way up the stairs, and she followed. There's a big room up here that I'll usually use, but we'll have it all cleaned out and looking fresh for my mother on Friday. She'll use it while she's here. She's a particular woman, and I wouldn't be surprised if she showed up with a potential bride for me. Really? Becky didn't want to have to endure anyone being upset with her over the marriage. Really? She's been trying to get me to move back to New York and marry for years. I haven't seen her in 2 years, and I've lived in Crete for over a year. It's perfectly plausible that the baby is mine. He showed her the large room he'd use. This will be my room. I'm only going to ask you to come up here and clean it on Friday morning. You don't need to be climbing a lot of stairs in your condition. I promise you that I'm perfectly capable of doing everything I did before I was expecting. I have worked every day of this pregnancy in one way or another. She'd been so relieved to give her notice at the restaurant she couldn't even express it. At least I won't be serving dozens of smelly men every day. He laughed at that. Nope. Just one. She grinned. Well, hopefully you'll bathe a little more often than most of my customers at the restaurant did. Amos smiled. I think we're going to get along just fine. I don't have any food here yet. We're going to have to head back to town to do some shopping, but I wanted you to see what you were working with first. You know. Maybe we do have a little time to look at furniture today. I won't go back to work until tomorrow. And you're a builder? Becky wasn't sure if he'd told her that or if Mrs. Franklin had. Or if she'd made it up in her own head. She just knew she thought he was a builder. I am. I have a crew of men who work under me. I'm working on rebuilding the town after the latest fire. What time do you want me to serve breakfast? He shrugged. Around 6 is usually good. I won't be home for lunch most days, but if you'll pack one for me, that would be good. And I will be home around 6 for supper. She nodded, making a mental note of the times as she followed him out to the wagon again. I can make all that happen with no problem. Do you have a favorite food? I'm not picky. You're talking to a man who has cooked for himself for more than 3 years. I am happy with anything I don't have to cook. All right. She settled herself on the seat, hearing her stomach growl. She patted the baby there. I'm starting to get hungry. Let's get that shopping done so I can come home and feed us both. I'll take you to a restaurant in town. Then you can eat a little faster. We wouldn't want to starve that baby, would we? Becky smiled over at him, and her eyes met her mother's as they drove past the ranch where she'd been raised. Her smile faded, and she looked down at her hands. What is it? We just passed my family's ranch. And my mother was standing out front. I see. He reached over and covered her hand with his. She's still not speaking to you? Neither of my parents have since the day they kicked me out. It broke my heart, but I didn't know what else to do. Have you thought about talking to them? Now that you're married, maybe they won't be so angry. Amos hated that she was so distraught over the situation. Maybe. But Becky knew she wouldn't. How could she? Her parents had turned their backs on her in her hour of need. She wasn't sure she'd ever be able to forgive that. But more importantly, she knew they'd never forgive her. I'll go with you if you're afraid. She shook her head. I'll think about it, but it won't be this week. As they drove, he talked to her about his vision for his future. I didn't expect to stay here in Crete, but there's something about the place that's calling me. I knew as soon as I set foot in town that this was where I needed to be. He didn't mention that a strange person had come up to him that night, telling him he needed to make Crete his home. He wasn't sure who the man was, but he'd come to him again and again. I'm glad you stayed. I don't think I've thanked you for getting me out of the situation I was in, but I want you to know that I am grateful. I never thought I'd end up pregnant and alone. I'm sure you didn't. I'm very sorry about your fiancé, he said. Me too. He was a good person, and no one should ever die the way he did. How did he die? He was a miner, just like his father before him. There was a cave-in at the mine, and he didn't make it. She stared straight ahead as she told the story, her heart sad all over again. His father made it out. Only 3 men died in that one. I'm very sorry for your loss. He was, but he found he wasn't. He was proud to have her as his wife, riding beside him on the wagon seat. She was a beautiful woman, and her pregnancy didn't detract from it at all. He'd always wanted children, and he would raise hers as his own. Why not? It didn't hurt him that another man had fathered him or her. When they got into town, he went to the restaurant in the hotel first, the one where she'd worked. It's going to be strange coming here as a customer. Is this where you worked? He asked, walking around to help her down. She nodded. It is. The manager isn't happy with me. I'm sure he's not. I am, though. He held the door open for her, and she stepped in before him. The manager glared at her from across the room. Have you come to beg for your job back? I'd normally say no, but I have lots of tables that need to be seen to. He stopped when he saw Amos behind her. Oh, Mr. Bowen, I didn't see you there. Amos put his arm around Becky's waist. We'd like a table, please. Mr. Statler closed his eyes for a moment, obviously struggling with his temper. Of course, sir. Right this way. He led them to a quiet table in the corner of the restaurant. May I offer my congratulations on your marriage? Amos pulled out a chair for Becky as he nodded at the manager. Thank you. He sat down across from his wife and waited while the manager brought them menus. Becky leaned forward. He's angry. He's having to wait tables today, and he's always made it clear that's beneath him. Amos shrugged. He'll survive. He accepted the menu. My wife and I would both like water to drink, please. The manager hurried away while Amos looked down at the menu. Any idea what you want? Becky's stomach gave a growl loud enough for him to hear. I'll just have the soup. He frowned at her. You're a lot hungrier than soup. Why don't I order for both of us? Becky nodded happily. She didn't want to order something that was out of his price range, and she had no idea what that price range was, so she needed to let him do it himself. That would be much better for her. I'd like that. 20 minutes later, she had a steak and a baked potato on her plate, and she cut into the steak hungrily. She'd had decent breakfasts and suppers every day, thanks to Mrs. Franklin, but her lunches had always been lacking. She'd served plates of rich food to all the customers that had come into the restaurant without being able to eat anything of what she served. After their meal, they walked next door to the mercantile. What's my budget for groceries? She asked in a whisper. He frowned at her. I'm not going to put you on a budget for groceries. Just pick out what you need. Becky bit her lip, walking through the store and thinking. She grabbed a loaf of fresh-made bread, which she knew had been made by Beatrice, the wife of the telegraph operator. She wouldn't have time to make bread before their evening meal. She picked out flour, sugar, beans, and everything else she remembered seeing in her mother's kitchen. She was a good cook, and she looked forward to showing him just how good of a cook. We don't have any pans, she overheard Amos say at the counter, and Toria hurried over to show him the pan she thought he should purchase for Becky. Becky looked at the price tag with wide eyes. Those are too much. She pointed to another set of pans that were a little more than half the price. These will do fine. What's the difference between the pans? Amos asked Toria. Those are good for a young couple who has a tight budget, but they won't last more than a year or two. This other set of pans will last at least 20 years or more. If money isn't terribly tight, I would get this set, Toria said, indicating the set she had shown him. All right. We'll get this set. Becky put her hand on his arm. I'm not trying to contradict you, but I really can use the other set just fine. There's no need for you to. He picked up the crate with the pans in it and carried it to the counter, setting it down. Are you finished picking out the food you need? She nodded. I made a pile on the counter. I hope I didn't choose too much. I'm sure you didn't. He pulled a roll of cash from his pocket and carefully counted out the amount Toria gave him. Will you deliver that? I finally moved into the new house. Toria wrote down the directions he gave her. It'll be there within a couple of hours. Is that soon enough? He nodded. Sounds perfect. We're going to shop for furniture now. If you don't find what you need at the furniture store in town, you can always come back here and look through our catalog. It would take a week to arrive, but you'd have more selection that way. He shook his head. I'm afraid my mother is going to be here on Friday, and she will not be pleased at all if my house isn't furnished. Toria smiled. Mothers can be very difficult. They can. And I don't want to give her any reason not to love Becky as soon as she sees her. Of course not. Toria waved goodbye to Becky, and Becky waved back, a smile on her face. Amos offered her his arm, and they walked to the furniture store, which wasn't a large store, but there was a lot crammed into the small space. Becky was immediately drawn to a cradle and couldn't prevent herself from walking over to it, her hand rubbing over the fine woodwork. Amos followed her over. Do you like that one? There's another at the other end of the store. Becky didn't look at the price tag because she was afraid to see the cost. I like this one. Please. He nodded, smiling. Absolutely. He nodded at the salesman who had followed them across the room. We'll take this. Then he headed across the room to the armchairs. I want to find just the one I like. You can pick out the tables for the parlor, but I want a chair that fits me well, that I'll enjoy sitting in when I get home at the end of the day. All right. She left him to sit in the different chairs as she wandered around and looked at little sets of tables. She wanted a low table for in front of the sofa, and then she wanted tables for each side of it. 3 should be enough for their parlor. She wondered if they could spend a little money to decorate, but she didn't ask. He'd already spent so much on the house that day. She found the table she wanted, and he found a chair. Come over here, Becky, he called. She walked to him and looked at the chair he was in. Will this match the sofa? She made a face as she thought about the sofa that was in his parlor. I think it will go nicely. They're both the same shade of blue. Good. He looked at the salesman. We'll take this chair and the table she chose. Now for artwork. Can we afford all this? She asked in a whisper. I wouldn't be buying it if we couldn't. He pointed to 7 different paintings. Which do you like the best? I think we should have one for over the sofa, don't you? She nodded. All right. She pointed to her favorite of them. And those 2 smaller paintings would look good in there as well. That's the spirit. Amos grinned at her, pleased that she was finally stopping her constant worry about money and accepting what he needed her to do. Now let's go find the high chair. They found a chair that would look good in the kitchen, and she ran her hand over the smooth wood. I do like this one. Then we'll get it. She bit her lip. Would it be possible for us to go to the dry goods store? I'd like to be able to make some pillows to match the parlor. Those silly little pillows that a man is afraid to sit on? Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. He wrinkled his nose. If they'll make you happy, then you can make them. He wouldn't sit on them, but she obviously thought they were necessary. Thank you. He arranged for Wednesday afternoon delivery of the furniture, and they left the store to go to the dry goods store. How many of those dreadful pillows will you make? Becky laughed. I want a few for my bed, and I'll make probably 4 or 5 for the parlor. How many of the chairs did you buy? 2. Then I'll make 4. One for each end of the sofa and one for each of the chairs. Then, probably 5 or 6 for my bed, but those shouldn't bother you. She thought about asking him for fabric to make some things for the baby, because she hadn't been able to do that yet, but she didn't want to push her luck. When they stepped into the dry goods store, he let her choose the fabrics she wanted for the pillows. Do you need to make anything new for yourself? Or for the baby? He asked as she was having the fabric cut. She bit her lip. I don't want to ask you to spend anything else on me. I'm offering. Go choose what you think you'll need. Amos watched as she meticulously chose fabric, and then paid for everything. As they drove back toward the house, he looked at her and saw that her face was glowing. Happy? She nodded. I haven't been able to make anything for the baby yet. I haven't had the time or the money, and now I'll be able to prepare for him. I'm very excited. She looked at him. Thank you, Amos. I really appreciate all you're doing for me and my baby. Our baby. That baby will have 2 parents. Not one. That's when it hit her that he really did plan to parent with her, and she smiled, even as they passed her parents' house. Chapter 3. As soon as they got back to their new home, Becky went in, looking carefully through the kitchen to see if there was anything else they needed. She had fabric for all of her sewing projects, including curtains, in the back of the wagon. Amos had said he would bring them in after unhitching the horses. Thankfully the food arrived a few minutes after they did, and she busied herself putting things away and making plans for supper that evening. Are you hungry for anything in particular? She asked as Amos came in with a crate full of food. He shook his head. Surprise me. He wasn't picky, and he had a feeling anything she made would be better than anything he could dream up. I'm going to get started on the back porch. I'd meant to work on that earlier today, but then we went back into town. I may not have time to get it done before my mother arrives. I'm starting to get a little nervous about your mother arriving, just so you know. She worked on unpacking the crate, thinking about what she wanted to fix. She settled on a thick beef soup with noodles. Mrs. Franklin had taught her to make noodles, and she really enjoyed the process. It gave her mind time to wander. Don't worry about her. She's going to love you because you're going to give her a grandbaby. He walked out of the kitchen and toward the back of the house. The porch was started but not finished, and he really did want it as perfect as he could get it, so they could sit outside and watch the sunset, before and after his mother was there. Becky was thankful the house was new, and there was little cleaning up that needed to be done. It was just a matter of keeping up with how fresh it already looked. There were walls that needed to be painted, but she'd seen paint buckets sitting around. That was something she could do while he worked if he wanted her to. On the porch, Amos gave himself over to the methodical push and pull of the saw as he cut the boards for the railing. He glanced up and wasn't surprised to see the stranger watching him. He didn't say anything for a minute, preferring to finish his task first. Over the time the man had been coming to him, he'd learned that making him wait didn't perturb him at all. How can I help you today? Amos finally asked. Don't you mean to ask how I'll help you? The stranger grinned at him, leaning against the side of the house, which had yet to be painted. Amos could already picture it painted white with the porch green. It would be beautiful. Amos just looked at him. I reckon you're going to eventually tell me something. If not, I'm just going to keep working. Your bride needs to fall in love with you. Amos raised an eyebrow. Unless you're going to give me some sort of magic love potion to work with, I'm not sure how I'm going to make that happen. Well, you need to court her, of course. It's important she love you before the baby is born. Why? Amos stared at the stranger, trying to understand why it mattered exactly when his wife fell in love with him. As long as she did, Amos would be happy. The stranger laughed. Do you really expect me to answer that? Don't you know me better than that by now? Amos sighed. So I need to get her to fall in love with me before when? When will the baby be born? No one can ever tell those things, can they? You're just going to have to work fast. With that, the man faded from view. Amos removed his cowboy hat and hit his leg with it in frustration. He'd learned quickly to listen to every word the man said because everything he told him was the gospel truth. Whether he liked it or not, the man knew a great deal more than he did, so he needed to listen and obey. How on earth was he supposed to court his very pregnant wife? Maybe asking her how soon she would be having the baby would be a good first step. That's what he'd do. He'd ask and hopefully get a quick answer. He looked out over the fields and saw a few early spring flowers popping out of the ground. There weren't a lot in early April, but there were enough that he could pick a bouquet for supper. He sighed and got back to work, promising himself to pick those flowers. Why she needed to be in love with him before the baby came would be good information to have, and it might help him figure out what he was going to do, but he knew he'd get no more information on the topic from the stranger. Just before going into the house for supper, he walked out and picked a bouquet of wildflowers, getting as many different colors as he could. He carried the offering into the kitchen, holding it behind his back. "How's my favorite wife?" he asked. Becky turned around from the pot she was stirring on the stove. "Does this mean you have other wives hidden around that you haven't told me about yet?" Her grin told him she was amused by his words. "Well, no, but that means less competition for you." He winked at her, enjoying her blush. She laughed. "Supper's almost ready." He looked and saw the table was already set. "I have something to add to the table, if you'd like." He pulled the flowers from behind his back and held them out to her. "These are for you." Becky's hand went to her chest in surprise. "Thank you, Amos." The truth was, no one had ever brought her flowers before. It wasn't something Cliff had ever done. "They're beautiful." She took them and frowned. If there was a vase in this house, where would it be? He shook his head. "I never thought of that. There isn't a vase here." "No matter." Becky hurried to a cabinet and pulled out a tall glass, putting the flowers into water in the glass. "I love that you have a pump right in the kitchen. We didn't have that when I was growing up, and we were always having to go outside to pump water. I tried to think of everything a wife would want when I designed this place." She looked at him with surprise. "You designed the house as well as building it?" She carried her glass to the table and set it in the middle, arranging the flowers fussily. "I did. I've always wanted several children, so I designed it with that in mind. I figure I'll eventually build a little house for my mother in the backyard because once grandkids come along, we'll never get her to go back to New York." He walked to the sink and washed his hands, inhaling the scent of the meal she was cooking. "Supper smells good. I can't wait to try your cooking." She smiled at that. "I hope it tastes as good as it smells. This is one of my favorite meals, but I'm not sure how you'll like it." Filling 2 bowls, she carried them to the table. She'd made one of her favorite things, but it also happened to be one without a great deal of meat, so it was an inexpensive meal to make. She hoped he would appreciate her thriftiness. Once they were seated, he took her hand in his and said a brief prayer over the meal. "I'm glad you thought to get bread at the store. There's no way you could have had some ready for supper." He buttered a piece, happy with how soft it was. "No, I couldn't have. But I'll make some fresh tomorrow." She already looked forward to taking care of him and pampering him and making all of his favorite things for him. "What's your favorite food?" He shrugged. "Anything with beef. I'm a meat eater." He took a big spoonful of the beef, gravy, and noodles. "This is delicious." "Thank you. Mrs. Franklin taught me to make noodles while we were working together, and it just seemed like it would go nicely with beef this way." She was glad her experiment had turned out well. "I really like it." He put some of the carrots she had in a bowl on the table onto a small plate. "So you're from New York? How did you end up in Creed?" He swallowed the bite of food in his mouth before answering. "I was never fond of living in New York. My mother liked the society life there, but it wasn't for me. I decided when I was 18 that I was going to move to Colorado and dig for gold, which I did. I hit a vein, and mined it completely before anyone else found out about it. Then I went into town and cashed it in. I had enough there that I never had to work again, but I like to work." I've always been fascinated by construction, so I started my own business. I have 6 men who work for me, and I jump in and get my hands dirty right along with them. That explains a lot. It now made sense how he'd not worried about money as they'd purchased things that day. Do you think you'll want Crete to be your forever home? I do. I wouldn't have built this house if I didn't. This place is just the perfect home for me. I hope you'll always be happy here because I don't plan on leaving. I'd be willing to travel a little if you wanted, but other than that, I'll stay here. Becky was a little surprised at the way he spoke, as if they'd be together forever. That wasn't the way he'd talked Friday night. I've never even thought of travel. I've never been out of Colorado. In fact, I don't think I've ever been more than 20 miles from where I was born. Really? You need to go on the ocean at least once. It's so beautiful. You need to see the beaches of California, and the deserts of Arizona. We live in a beautiful country, and by not traveling, you're missing out on so much. She smiled at that. I haven't really had much opportunity for travel or anything else. I'm only 18. Really? He shook his head. You make me feel old. I'm only 25, but I've done so much more than you have. So you say your mother enjoyed New York society. Does that mean you were raised with wealth? Amos nodded. My father was a lawyer there, and he made more money than a man should. All of my sisters had huge parties when they came out, and mother was the reigning queen of society. Now all my sisters are married off and happy, so she's setting her sights on me. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a little of both. Now that we're married, it wouldn't be nearly as intimidating for her to come here and try to parade women in front of me. I really do think we should be prepared for her to bring at least one woman she wants me to marry. I know it will be uncomfortable, but once they see that I'm happily married, they should back off. Becky sighed. Happily married sounded so far off. She barely knew the man. Well, we're going to have to get to know each other as quickly as we possibly can if we want to appear happily married by the end of the week. She shook her head. I'm not quite sure how we're going to manage, but I will try my very best. That's all I can ask. As soon as she'd finished eating and stood up to clear the table, he caught her hand in his and pulled her down into his lap. Being comfortable around each other is something they'll be looking for. He stroked a tendril of hair that had escaped her bun from her face. You're a very beautiful woman, Mrs. Bowen. She blushed at his words. I don't know how you can think that with as huge as I am. He shook his head. Babies are gifts from God. We're going to enjoy every minute of that baby together. He looked into her eyes for a moment. Maybe you should tell me a little more about the baby's father. How long did you know him? I think we decided we were going to marry when we were 9. I've known him my whole life. We both grew up in this area, and we ran into each other from time to time. She shrugged. We would see each other at church. When we started courting, neither of our families were thrilled, but they didn't try to stop us. He was good to you? That's what worried him the most. He was frightened that she had been mistreated before they'd met. He didn't want that to be the case. She nodded. He was. He wasn't a man with courtly manners. He never brought me flowers. But he cared about me, and he always put my needs first. Good. He wanted to ask more, but he decided it wasn't his business. He'd accepted the fact that she was coming to him pregnant with another man's child, and he needed to leave it at that. What about you? Have there been no loves in your life? He shrugged. I went to events with girls in New York, but after leaving there, I've concentrated on my career. I've been so busy making money that women just didn't seem to matter to me. I see. She started to stand up, but he kept hold of her waist, keeping her there on his lap. Where do you think you're going? I want to get the dishes washed before the food dries on. She hated having to go through extra work just because she was procrastinating. I want to keep you here for a little longer. We need to get more comfortable with each other. He put one hand on her cheek, stroking it softly. May I kiss you? She nodded slowly. The truth was she enjoyed his kisses so much more than she ever had Cliff's that she felt guilty for it. He pressed his lips to hers, his hand staying at her waist. She felt her heartbeat speed up, and there was a tingling in her stomach she'd never experienced before. What was he doing to her to make her feel this way? "You're starting to get under my skin, Becky." He rested his forehead against hers. "Is Becky your full name?" She shook her head. "No, it's Rebecca." "I like that." He took a deep breath, trying to get his body under control. "You'd better do the dishes. When you're finished, join me in the parlor, though. We'll talk some more." "All right." She got off his lap, surprised to find her knees were a little wobbly. She walked to the sink and started the dishes, waiting until his footsteps took him out of the room before she leaned against the counter and let out a loud breath. The man was doing something to her, and she still couldn't figure out how he made it happen. In the other room, Amos sat down on the sofa, staring off into space for a moment. If he only had to be in love with Becky before the baby came, that would be easy. But her being in love with him? That might be a little harder. When she joined him a short while later, he patted the seat right beside him on the sofa, and she sat there. His arm came around her, and he held her against him, her head on his shoulder. "I think I'm going to build a porch swing, so we can sit outside and rock back and forth as we watch the stars." She smiled. "I'd like that. I picture us doing that with me holding a baby, and other children playing around us on the porch." "Do you see us having children together?" he asked. It was the first time she'd indicated she might be interested in something more permanent. He was pleased, but also surprised. She nodded. "I think I do. You're a good man, Amos Bowen. I can see forever with you very easily." He smiled at that, just holding her close. "Let's talk about dreams." When it was time for bed, he let her use the water closet first. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." Becky nodded, feeling strange going into her quiet room. She was spending her wedding night alone. As much as she already liked the man, she couldn't bring herself to ask him to share her room that night, though. She wasn't ready for anything more to happen between them, especially with her middle being so large. When they became intimate, and she realized it was when in her mind and not if, she wanted to be as slim as she used to be. She fell asleep with a smile on her lips. She was married to a good man, and she thanked God for him. Amos lay in bed for a long time, his hands folded behind his head. He wasn't sure why he thought being married to a woman he couldn't touch had been a good idea, but it had truly been his all along. He would spend his life never touching, but always wanting. No, the stranger was right. He needed to get her to love him before she had the baby. For his own peace of mind as much as anything else. He found her terribly attractive even in her very pregnant state. He could only imagine how he'd find her if she wasn't carrying another man's child. He sighed. Hopefully soon he'd be able to tell her about the feelings he was developing for her. For now, he would court her to the best of his ability. Which meant little gifts that told her he was thinking of her. There was a jewelry store in town. Maybe he could find her a necklace or a bracelet there. No. His eyes widened, and he grinned. He knew exactly what to get his pretty little wife that she would appreciate more than anything else. He was starting to get to know her, and he could see she was not like other women. She didn't need silly little trinkets to make her happy. Well, maybe silly little trinkets would help, but first he had a better idea. Every day he would bring her home a nice little gift. And hopefully every day she would fall just a little bit more in love with him. Because he needed her in his life for now and forever. He thought of the stranger's words about how he only had a short while to make her love him. He could do it. He knew he could. Chapter 4. Becky was up early the following morning. The baby had been active all night, and she just hadn't slept well. She spent an hour sewing curtains for the kitchen before she started breakfast. When Amos came down the stairs, he found his beautiful new wife in the kitchen making him pancakes. There was already a plate full of bacon beside her, and he plucked a piece off it. "Good morning." Becky grinned at him, shocked at how much her life had changed in just a few days. Good morning. Coffee is ready if you want to pour yourself a cup. He did as she suggested. Thank you for getting up early to cook for me. I couldn't really sleep anyway. The baby was kicking all night. Have you thought about names? He asked, sitting at the table with his coffee and another piece of pilfered bacon. I have thought a little, but I have no idea what I want. Do you have any ideas? He looked at her in surprise. You'd let me help you name the baby? She nodded. Absolutely. You're going to be his father. Cliff never knew he existed. You'll be there for skinned knees and long sleepless nights. I'll think about it then. He liked the idea of helping her name the baby, but he hadn't thought she'd even consider it. Becky put a stack of pancakes on a plate, along with some bacon. I forgot to get the maple syrup out. She reached up into a cupboard and pulled down the syrup and put it on the table. Hurry up and build that barn and buy the cow. I'd like to be able to make my own butter. Fresh butter does have a special taste to it, doesn't it? I've always thought so. She sat down across from him and buttered her pancakes, adding syrup. I'm going to pack you a lunch today, but since I haven't really had time to cook much, it'll have to be bacon sandwiches. I'll do better tomorrow. He smiled. Everything you do seems just right to me. She blushed, looking down. She'd had no idea a marriage to this man could seem so intimate. It had seemed like a business arrangement on Friday, and now it seemed like so much more. Tell me about your mother. He sighed. She's a society woman. She's not going to like the house, because it's in the country and not in a large city. She's not going to like the fact that I married without her present at the wedding. We're going to want to keep her out of town because we don't want her to find out that the baby isn't mine, but if she does, I have a story planned. You do? She looked at him inquiringly. I'll tell her that you were engaged, but we fell in love. When your fiancé died, we thought we should wait to marry, to avoid tarnishing his memory. So the baby is still mine. I don't like the idea of lying to your mother. My mother will never accept you if we don't. I'll tell you that now. She will think of you as a tarnished woman. Becky frowned, looking down at her plate, just like everyone else around here. I don't think of you as tarnished. I see in you a beautiful innocence. She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. How can I be innocent and 8 months pregnant? I don't know. But you manage it well. He drank down the last of his coffee and stood up. Is my lunch ready? She jumped up and went to the counter, where she quickly put together 2 sandwiches. Will that be enough? He shrugged. I'll run to the store for more if I need it. He took the bag with his lunch in it and grabbed her waist, kissing her softly. I'll see you at supper time. Miss me? She smiled as she watched him go. The man was so full of energy, she could just imagine what all he could accomplish in a day of work. After a moment, she shook her head and got back to her own work. She needed to finish the curtains, bake bread, make some pillows, and start sewing for the baby. She wanted as much done before his mother arrived as humanly possible. During his lunch break, Amos went to the dry goods store and chose some white cotton. Could you cut this fabric up into diapers for me? I'll pick them up on my way home. The proprietor nodded. I'll have my daughter get right on it. Amos grinned, knowing it was the perfect gift for his new wife. That and one other thing. Hurrying over to the mercantile, he spotted Toria behind the counter. I need a vase. Toria smiled. You're going to be a good husband to Becky, aren't you? Amos nodded. I'm going to do my very best. Toria led him over to their selection of vases. There were only 3, and he didn't have a preference, so he purchased the most expensive of the 3. May I leave this with you and pick it up after work? I'll put your name on it. She waved at him as he ran out the store and headed back to work. By supper time, Becky had accomplished most of the things on the short to-do list she'd made herself. She'd made several loaves of bread, so she could send more food with Amos for lunch the next day. The curtains were finished and hanging at the windows. And most importantly, there was a pot roast perfectly cooked with potatoes, and carrots ready for them to eat. Amos walked in at just past 6, sniffing the air. "Becky, if you weren't already my wife, I'd marry you all over again, just so you'd cook for me." She laughed, giggling as he caught her in an embrace. "But we are already married, so there's no need." "But there's still a need to treat you like a princess." He gave her the vase. "I thought you might want this for your flowers." She took the vase, and tears popped into her eyes. She swiped at them with the back of her hand. "No one has ever done anything so thoughtful for me." "You like it?" He hated that she was crying, but he hoped the tears were happy tears. He would wait to give her the diapers after supper. "I love it." She walked to him and pressed a kiss to his mouth. "Thank you, Amos." She still didn't understand how she had found such a sweet man and ended up as his wife. Hopefully she could live up to his expectations of her. "Supper's ready. Sit down, and I'll serve it." As soon as she had supper on the table, he took her hand for their prayer. "Thank you, God, for this beautiful woman, and for the food that you have provided. Thank you for blessing me. In Jesus' name. Amen." She blinked away tears once again. "You have to remember that women are more emotional when they're expecting. You're making me want to cry every few minutes." He grinned at her. "I'll try really hard to stop that." "I'd appreciate it." She took her first bite of roast beef and smiled to herself. It was as good as her mother's, and that's all she'd been shooting for. "How on earth did you learn to cook like this at your age?" he asked. "My mother always let me help her in the kitchen, and then Mrs. Franklin taught me a lot too. I do love to cook. I would seriously spend all my time cooking if I thought I could get away with it. I sew, but I don't enjoy it the way I do cooking." "Well, I'm all for you cooking just as much as you want." She laughed. "That's not at all self-serving, is it?" "Not at all." He forked up another bite of his roast beef. "Thanks for throwing yourself into being a good wife the way you have." As soon as they were both finished, she pulled a cake out of the icebox, carrying it to the table. "Room for more?" His eyes were wide as he looked at the cake. "I'm sure I can find a little space for that." "Good, I wouldn't want to think I made it for no reason." She cut them each a piece and served them, settling back down in her chair. As soon as she took a bite, she felt a kick against her ribs. "The baby likes the cake. He's making that very clear." "Oh?" "He's kicking my ribs. He only gets active in the middle of the night or if he likes what I'm eating. He's finicky that way." He frowned at her belly, seeing it move. "Could I feel?" She nodded, taking his hand and putting it on the movement on her side. "Did you feel it?" His eyes were wide as they met hers. "Wow. Does it hurt?" She shook her head. "At first it felt like little butterfly movements, but now I can usually make out if it's a foot or a hand. It's not strong enough to hurt, but it's sure strong enough to keep me awake at night. I'm glad it doesn't hurt." He grew silent, thinking about the baby. He had known there was a baby in there since the moment they'd met, but that was the first time the child had seemed real to him. "Is something wrong?" she asked, frowning. She didn't want him to be upset about the baby. He'd known about it before they married, so how could his mood suddenly change when he touched her stomach that way? "No, not wrong. I guess the baby wasn't exactly real to me until a moment ago, when I felt him kick." "Is that good or bad?" "Probably a little bit of both. I want him to be real, but I'd like a little longer with just the two of us before he comes. Does that make sense?" She nodded. "It does. I wish we had a little more time, too, but I have to admit, I'm ready to evict him. He's taking up an awful lot of space, and I'm not always comfortable." He grinned. "How can I make your life easier until he comes?" She shrugged. "You already have. Not having to wait tables all day and all night has already made my life a great deal easier." "I'm glad." While she did the supper dishes, he ran out to the wagon and grabbed the diapers for her, carrying them in. He wasn't sure if he'd overdone the amount of diapers she'd need, but it wouldn't hurt to have too many. Besides, hopefully they'd have another child before too terribly long, and then there would be 2 of them in diapers, and they'd need double the amount. He shook his head at himself. He was getting carried away. Becky turned as the back door opened, and Amos walked in with 2 armfuls of diapers. He set them on the table and left again before she could say a word. He came back 3 times, setting more diapers on the table each time. I think I may have bought a few too many diapers, but I wanted to make sure you had enough. Becky stared at the table, completely covered in diapers. There must be over 100 there. 120. Is that enough? Amos asked, having no idea how many diapers a baby went through. I've been told to expect the baby to go through about 10 per day, so that might be a few more than we need, but I will certainly put them to good use. She stepped toward him and wrapped her arms around him. How did you learn to be such a thoughtful man? It just comes naturally, I guess. When a woman is special enough to deserve a man's attention, he becomes more thoughtful as a direct response. She kissed him briefly, embarrassing herself. Get out of my kitchen and let me finish the dishes. Do you need help with them? Not at all. You might have to do a few after the baby is born, but for now, I'll do all of them. She pushed him toward the parlor, not wanting his help because she needed a few minutes to come to grips with his kindness. She knew Cliff never would have done the same things for her that Amos was doing. Amos went into the parlor and picked up a book he'd purchased for himself that day, all about being a father. He hadn't known there were books to teach a man things like that, but if they were available, he'd read them because he was determined to be the best father to that baby he could possibly be. When Becky joined him, she'd come to grips with her emotions, and she sat down beside him on the sofa. Have you thought about any names? He nodded. How would you feel about naming him Sebastian, if it's a boy? It was my father's name, and he was a good man. What happened to him? He died of a heart attack shortly after I left New York. I'm very sorry. She considered the name. I think Sebastian would be a good name for a baby. Would you mind if we named him Sebastian Clifford? So he would have something from his birth father? Amos didn't like the idea, but the child should have something of his father. She was right. I think that would be good. What about a name for a girl? I was thinking something like Annabelle, and we could call her Belle for short. Belle means beauty, and with you for a mother, there's no doubt she will be beautiful. Just like that, Becky was tearing up again. You have to stop making me cry. He reached out and flicked her tear away with his thumb. I don't do it on purpose. That's a good thing. If you made a concerted effort to make me cry, I know it would be much worse for me. I'm not trying to make it hard on you at all. Amos looked into her eyes. I just don't think you have any idea what a very special person you are. She took a deep breath. I hope you always see me that way. By the time his mother arrived on Friday afternoon, Becky had the pillows made and the curtains all hung. She was waiting in the parlor when he came home from the train station, his mother behind him. There was another girl there, too, and Becky couldn't help but wonder if this was the girl his mother wanted him to marry or one of his sisters. She got to her feet and smiled at the visitors. Mother, this is my wife, Becky. Becky, this is my mother, Josephine, and her traveling companion, Patricia. It's nice to meet you both. Becky smiled sweetly. I have some tea and cookies ready if you're hungry. His mother looked her up and down, her eyes stopping at Becky's enormous stomach. That would be very nice. Have a seat, and I'll bring them. Becky walked toward the kitchen, not letting his mother's obvious interest in her condition bother her. She needed to carry on as she was and not let something like that completely derail her. Amos followed her into the kitchen. I'll carry the tray. As soon as they were away from the others, Becky looked at him. How did she take the news that you were married? Not well. Patricia was one of the young ladies that I escorted for a while in New York. He shook his head. Mother was hoping I'd marry her. But you're already married. There is that. He tapped her nose with the tip of his index finger. Get that tea. Mother's liable to come looking for us if we make her wait too long. Did you tell her I was expecting before you came here? Becky asked as she took down the silver tea set he'd gotten her as a gift the previous day. The man had yet to come home for supper without having a gift in hand. I didn't. I thought she'd see that for herself when she arrived. I see. Becky was more nervous than ever. The woman had wanted her son to marry someone else, and she'd brought a former flame. How was she going to compete with that when she was so far along? She put the tea onto the tray and added 2 different kinds of cookies. She put milk into the small pitcher and put sugar cubes into a bowl. There. Would you carry it? Of course. And don't be nervous. She can't make me divorce you and marry Patricia. Nothing could. Becky took a deep breath and preceded him into the parlor, going to sit on the open spot on the sofa beside Patricia. His mother frowned at her. You sit in the other chair, dear. You're going to crowd Patricia with your big belly. Amos shook his head. No, Becky's more comfortable on the sofa, and as she's carrying your grandchild, she should have choice of places to sit. Becky stood up. I really don't mind, Amos. I do. You sit where you're comfortable. If Patricia feels crowded, she can trade places with me and take my chair. Becky nodded, sitting down on the couch again. Would you care for tea, Mrs. Bowen? Yes, and one of each kind of cookie, please. Mrs. Bowen waited to be served, and Becky was certain it was because that was what she was used to back in New York. She had served enough people in her life that it didn't bother her to do it either. Yes, she was one of the people who served others, while his mother was one who she would serve. It seemed hardly fair. She handed the older woman the tea and plate of cookies, before looking at Patricia. What would you like? Tea and both types of cookies as well, thank you. Patricia had an air to her voice that made Becky want to shove the cookies up her nose. How long will we have the pleasure of your company? Becky asked, praying they planned to only stay for the weekend. Are you already trying to get rid of us? Mrs. Bowen asked, a frown on her face. No, ma'am. I was merely inquiring. I do need to make sure I have enough food on hand to cook for everyone. Mrs. Bowen looked at her son. You're letting your pregnant wife cook? Why don't you hire help for her? I enjoy cooking, Becky said, wondering if anyone would listen to her. If my wife wanted help, she'd have it. At the moment, she's enjoying cooking and cleaning. Maybe after the baby comes she'll want some help, and in that case, I'll provide it for her. Amos wasn't going to let anything his mother said upset him. He was too happy about spending the night in bed with his wife that evening. I think you should get her help now. Mrs. Bowen crossed her arms under her large bosom. I'll make note of your thoughts. He accepted tea from Becky and bit into one of the cookies. These are amazing as always, my love. Her heart seemed to stop for a moment as he called her that, but she realized immediately it was for his mother's benefit, not hers. Thank you. He took a sip of the tea, winking at her over it, and she shook her head at him, embarrassed that he would flirt with her in front of his mother. I plan to start building a barn this weekend. We want a cow for milk. After that, I'll build a chicken coop. Becky wants to have farm fresh eggs to cook for breakfast every morning. His mother shuddered delicately. And who will milk the cow and collect the eggs? Becky shrugged. I've done both more times than I can count. I would be happy to continue doing both. She truly didn't mind doing chores. Work was a part of life, and if you refused to be happy while you did it, there was much misery in your future. Don't encourage him, dear. You'll end up being his slave for life. You need servants. Patricia made a sound of disgust. It's just as well you married before I arrived, Amos. There's no way I would have been able to perform all the duties of a houseful of servants the way your little wife seems to be doing. And in her condition. Amos smiled at the young lady. Which is why we never would have suited as husband and wife, Patricia. Becky suits me perfectly because she expects no one to wait on her, and she simply works as hard as she can for both of us. Patricia looked over at Mrs. Bowen. I really hope we can head back to New York on Monday. This has been a failed trip. Mrs. Bowen looked at Becky. When are you due? In about 3 weeks. Then yes, Patricia, we'll head back Monday. I'll have just enough time to return you to your family and come back to be here for the birth of my grandchild. Becky's eyes widened. You will? I will. I hope you'll be ready for me. Yes, ma'am. Of course, I will. Becky's eyes met Amos's, and hers were filled with trepidation. She didn't want his mother there when the baby was born. Chapter 5. After the supper dishes were done and everyone had gone to their respective rooms that night, Becky and Amos were lying in bed, flat on their backs, trying to ignore how odd it was that they were sharing a bed with no real intimacy between them. I don't want your mother here when the baby is born, Becky said softly. I know you don't. I don't know that we have a choice, though. Shouldn't I be able to choose who is present at the birth of my child? Isn't this something that should be my choice? Amos rolled to his side, facing her, and he put a hand on her arm. I'll talk to her tomorrow and ask her to wait to come back until after the baby has been born. That would be nice. I really don't feel comfortable around her, and I think I should be comfortable with everyone who is present for the birth of my child. She froze for a moment. You don't think she wants to be in the room with me when the baby is born, do you? He shook his head. No, I don't think she's even been present when my sisters have given birth. You'll be fine. Good, because that would make me very uncomfortable. I can understand that. He pulled her close to his side, cradling her head on his shoulder. I'm sorry she was so ugly to you. I think she was even worse to Patricia. Why would she bring someone all the way across the country to marry a man who hadn't agreed to marry her in the first place? She closed her eyes, not sure she wanted an answer to her next question. You didn't agree to marry her, did you? Of course I didn't. I've only agreed to marry one woman, and she's lying in bed with me at this very moment. Oh, good. I was worried for a moment there. Becky relaxed against him, finding being this close to him a great deal more comfortable than she'd expected it to be. Don't worry. I'll protect you from all the dragons in your life, just like a knight in shining armor. Even if one of those dragons happens to be my mother. She giggled. She does seem to breathe fire. He grinned. Yes, she does. But don't worry, I have a mighty sword that will slay the evil dragon if she attacks my lady. You certainly are going to win the knightly tournament, my lord. Go to sleep, little imp. Can an imp take on a dragon by herself? I wouldn't try it. To Becky, the weekend seemed to drag on forever. Every time she turned around, Patricia was needing something different. Her tea was too cold, her milk was too warm. She needed her toast to be golden brown, not dirt brown. By Sunday night, Becky was done with the woman. Can't we throw her out in the snow? We could if it was snowing. It's downright balmy outside. Then maybe you could get some ice from the ice house in town, and I could spend an entire day shaving little pieces off the ice for us to throw her in. That would please me. He laughed, turning to her in bed. They're leaving first thing in the morning. We won't have time for such an elaborate scheme. Maybe I should just put her over my shoulder and carry her to the creek. It will be ice cold at this time of year. Ooh, that's not a bad idea at all. Becky turned toward him, her belly pressing against his side, and put one hand on his chest. I'm going to miss sleeping with you. It's been comforting having you here. He looked at her, barely able to see her in the darkness. Would you like me to keep sleeping here with you? I'm sure I crowd you. I don't want to keep doing that. You don't crowd me at all. Or if you do, I don't mind. I would honestly feel better sleeping down here with you. I worry that something will happen to you or the baby during the night, and I'll be upstairs and not know. She sighed. It would be selfish of me to ask you to sleep here. Enjoy your big bed upstairs. He rolled to his side facing her and cupped her face in his hands, kissing her passionately. I'm sleeping down here from now on, and that's final. He loved their time in bed together before they fell asleep. It was always platonic, but they spent time getting to know one another better. I'm glad they're leaving tomorrow morning, she said softly. I should be ashamed to say that, but I'm not. I want them gone. Patricia has not been kind, and your mother hasn't been the sweetest woman in the world either. I can't believe how unhappy they've made me. I'm sorry. Hopefully mother will get home and realize she doesn't want to come back. I'm going to talk with her on the way to the train station tomorrow and let her know that we would rather she waited until after the baby is born to visit again. I'd appreciate that. And I hope she listens to you. She had little faith that Mrs. Bowen would listen to anyone else's opinion about anything, though. He pulled her close and held her as they both fell asleep, saying a silent prayer that his mother would listen. His wife shouldn't have to put up with his mother during the last few weeks of her pregnancy. Becky packed lunches for all three of them as they left the following morning. Mrs. Bowen wrinkled her nose. They have a perfectly good dining car on the train. You don't need to cook for us. I was trying to be considerate and save you a little money, Mrs. Bowen. Forgive me for offending you. Becky plucked the lunch bags away from the other two women and gave them to Amos. Please share these with your men today. Surely at least someone will appreciate a homemade lunch. Amos hid a grin as he kissed Becky. I'll do just that. See you this evening. Becky spent the day washing the sheets the women had used and doing her best to remove any traces of either of them. They had been difficult the entire weekend, and she wanted everything that reminded her of them completely gone. When Amos returned home, he saw that everything was clean and fresh, and the house had even been aired out. I couldn't handle Patricia's perfume clinging in the air for another second. Now you can't even tell they were here. Amos laughed, pleased with her for taking matters into her own hands. She was a hard worker, and she asked nothing of others she wasn't willing to do herself. Well, I'm glad every memory of them is gone. I was ready for them to leave as well. How did the talk go with your mom? Is she going to wait until after the baby is born to come back? She said she would. I hope she was telling me the truth. Me too. I have no desire to have her back so soon. He shrugged. When she comes back, she'll probably bring either a maid or a nanny. I want to take care of the baby myself, but I wouldn't say no to a maid. Becky grinned at him to let him know she was joking. It was late that night when she heard the wind start to howl. The baby was kicking more than usual, so she got out of bed to peer out the window. It was snowing, and not just a little. April was a little late in the year for a blizzard, but that didn't mean it wasn't happening. As she stood watching, she felt something liquid on her legs, and she gasped. Her water had broken. She found a clean nightgown and went to the water closet to change, and then she went back to the bedroom, sitting on the bed beside Amos and touching his arm. Amos, there's a storm. And the baby's coming. He sat up straight, confused. Baby? Now? Yes, the baby's coming, and there's a blizzard. He jumped up and looked out the window, frowning. I don't know if I can get Hannah out here. It's too far. What was he going to do? There's no way he could deliver a baby himself, and he knew a woman needed help with these things. She bit her lip. Then you'll have to help me. It can't be that hard. Her mind raced, and she tried to stay calm and not panic. Her plan was to have Hannah at her side the entire time. He shook his head, backing away from her. I know nothing about giving birth. There's no way I could do it. The mere thought frightened him. She took a deep breath, her hand going to her back as a contraction started. I'll do it alone then. Make sure you bring me a knife to cut the cord. She'd talked to Hannah over and over about the process, and she was pretty sure she could handle it on her own. She was a strong woman, after all. You can't do it alone. I'll try to get Hannah. He looked out the window again, frowning. The storm isn't quite as bad as I thought. Be careful. She sat down on the edge of the bed, and carefully started to prepare it for birth. She had a list of things to do from Hannah, and she was more than willing to do them. Keeping busy would be very good for her. Amos saddled his horse, already in a bit of a panic. How was he going to possibly make it to town in this storm, to bring Hannah home with him? And then he spotted the stranger in front of him. Go to her mother. She can help. But will she? There's only one way to know. And I suggest you hurry. The stranger faded from view, and Amos thought for a moment about whether he wanted to waste the time trying to get her mother to help or if he should go for Hannah. Instead of trying to make it to Creed, he carefully followed the road to the next house. Her parents. When he arrived, he wasn't sure what to expect, but he pounded on the door, hoping against hope they'd hear him over the howling of the wind. Her father came to the door, and Amos explained. "I'm sorry to bother you in the middle of the night, but your daughter is in labor. She's my wife, and we live just south of here." He said a silent prayer that the man would be willing to help in some way, anyway. Her father shut the door in his face, and he took a deep breath, turning away. If they wouldn't help, he'd have to go into town and find someone who would. He just prayed he could make it through the snow to find Hannah. Just as he was reaching for his saddle, he heard a yell. "Mister! Please take me to my daughter." He turned and looked, and there was her mother, dressed for the cold. He grabbed her waist and lifted her onto his horse. She was just as slender as his wife. "Thank you." He had a little more hope now that he had someone who could help Becky make it through the birth. She nodded, pulling her scarf up to cover her face against the storm. The 10-minute ride took more than half an hour in the snow, and when he got to the house, he said a silent prayer of thanks for the safe travels. He knew there was no way he could have made it without God's help. He'd almost missed the turn off, but the stranger stood in the road right before his house, pointing the way. He dismounted, reaching his hands up to lift her mother down. "You go inside. I'll see to the horse." He watched her as she fought to open the door, the wind too strong. He led the horse to the stable and cared for him, praying the whole while that his wife was getting cared for the same way by her mother. Becky was in the kitchen boiling water when she heard the door open. She was surprised Amos had been able to get to town so quickly in the storm, but she was very thankful he had. She called out, "Hannah? I'm in the kitchen." She sat on the edge of a chair, thankful she no longer had to worry about delivering the baby on her own. The nurse was there, and she would see to the safety of both Becky and her child. Becky blinked as her mother entered the kitchen instead of Hannah. "What are you doing here?" The last person she wanted to see was her mother. "I'm here to help you. You can't have that baby by yourself." Her mother approached her, looking like she wanted to touch her, but not sure how the gesture would be taken. "You abandoned me 7 months ago. Why do you care what happens to me now?" Becky wanted to turn her back on her mother, the same way her mother had turned her back on her. Her mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Your father gave me no choice but to abandon you. I begged him to let you stay." Becky felt tears spring to her own eyes, and she sniffed, wiping the tears away. "You did?" "Yes, I did. When your husband came to our house tonight, your father shut the door in his face, but I followed after him. I couldn't let you try to have that baby on your own. Or worse, with only a man for help." Becky giggled at that. Amos was afraid to help. "Is that his name? Is he good to you?" "He's so good to me, Mama. He treats me like a princess, and he brings me gifts every day. I think I love him." No, she was sure she loved him. How could she not love someone as kind and good as Amos was? Good. A woman should love her husband. Her mother offered her arm to help Becky up. "Let's go to your room, and we'll see how you're doing. Have you ever delivered a baby, Mama?" Becky tried to keep the fear from her voice, but she knew she hadn't. She needed the baby to be all right. "I have. I've delivered several. I was a midwife before I married your father." "I didn't know that." Becky looked at her mother with new respect. "Your father expected me to give up everything when I married him, including my former career." "Why?" Becky couldn't imagine why he wouldn't want her mother making what money she could and doing something meaningful. Not that being a mother wasn't meaningful, but it would have been so much more. Her mother shook her head. "I never understood. He wanted my entire life to revolve around him and our children. Child. I lost 4 before you were born. I'm not going to let that happen to you. I'm so glad you're here." Becky rested her head on her mother's shoulder for a moment as she slowly walked to her bedroom. So am I. Amos stayed in the stable, talking to his horse until he couldn't take it another minute. He had to know if his Becky was all right. He opened the door to the house and called out, hoping her mother would come tell him it was all over. Her mother came, but she was wringing her hands together. It's almost time. Becky's doing fine. Amos was worried, but he didn't know her mother well enough to challenge her. Something was obviously wrong, but he didn't know what. Instead of arguing, he dropped to his knees, praying for his beautiful Becky and the child she carried. He didn't know how long he stayed there on his knees, but once when he looked up, he saw the stranger kneeling beside him, his head bowed as well. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, her mother came out carrying a baby wrapped in a blanket. It's a girl. He felt his heart catch in his throat as he slowly got to his feet, his legs cramping under him. Becky? She's going to be all right. She lost a little more blood than she should have, but I'll stay and help around the house until she's ready to be up on her feet again. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I don't know what else to say. He stared at the little girl held in her grandmother's arms. A girl. Mrs. Brown smiled at him. Yes, a girl. And call me Minerva if you would like. I don't know anything about girls. She's healthy? Amos wanted to hold her so much his arms ached with it, but he was afraid to say something. What if he dropped her? The baby is beautiful. 10 fingers and 10 toes. Everything is as it should be. Becky's resting, but she's awake. Go see her. Amos dragged his feet as he walked slowly toward their bedroom. The cradle was at the foot of the bed. Becky? She smiled at him, her face tired but happy. Did you see her? Isn't she beautiful? He sat down at the very edge of the bed, worried he'd hurt her. She is beautiful. I can't believe you gave me a daughter. The love he felt for that little girl was almost as strong as the love he felt for her mother. I'm never going to abandon her. No, I know you won't. It won't matter what she does. But if some boy gets her pregnant, I'll beat him to a bloody pulp. He saw red just thinking about it. Becky laughed. Maybe you should start investigating chastity belts now. Don't think I won't. He smiled down at her, happy she was able to laugh. Your mother says that you lost too much blood, and she'll need to stay to help out for a while. Do you want her here, or should I find someone else? I want my mother. Thank you, though. My father wouldn't let her support me after he found out I was pregnant. And he didn't want her to come to me tonight, but she didn't listen. She came anyway. I'm glad she did. I wouldn't have known what to do. My mother used to be a midwife, and I didn't know it until tonight. I think there's a lot I can learn from my mother. I just need to get to know her. Amos stroked her cheek. Can I get you anything? Are you all right? She nodded, her eyes sleepy. I'm just tired. I think I'm going to sleep now. All right. You sleep. I'll be right here if you need me. He didn't plan to leave her at all. He'd watch her sleep if that's what it took. His beautiful wife was going to be just fine. He turned as he heard the door open. Her mother carried the baby in. Do you want to hold her while I fix some breakfast for us? He stared at the baby for a moment. I'm afraid I'll drop her. Mrs. Brown laughed. I'll show you just how to hold her. A moment later, his arms were full of his beautiful little girl, and his heart was full as well. He had no idea a day could begin so perfectly, but his had. He looked toward the window and saw that the snow had stopped. If anything went wrong, he could go for Dr. J.T. Becky opened her eyes for a moment and saw Amos cradling their little girl in his arms. She couldn't remember what name they'd decided on for her, or even if there had been a girl's name. Either way, they'd figure it out later when she wasn't quite so tired. Amos took the baby to the window and talked to her, his voice low so as not to disturb his wife. You were born on a night when no one, man or beast, should have been out in the cold of night, but your grandmother came to the rescue, and she helped your mama give birth to you. Your mother sacrificed a lot for you to be here, and I hope you know how very loved you are. By so many people. He stared down at the beautiful little face, and he said a prayer of thanksgiving. His wife and daughter were both healthy, and he needed nothing else in the world but for the two of them to be alive and well. He looked over at the stranger who was standing beside him, his stomach falling. I didn't do it. She doesn't love me yet. The stranger just stared at him. Then you failed. Failed at what? Just like that, the stranger faded from his view, leaving him frustrated with no answers. What had he failed at? Did this mean Becky would never love him? What was he supposed to do now? He looked down at the baby and decided that no matter what the stranger said, he'd do everything he could to make Becky love him. Whether it was too late or not, she was still the love of his life, and he had to make sure she knew it every day in every way he could show her. From the kitchen, he heard his mother-in-law calling him, and he gently put the baby in her cradle and walked into the kitchen with a last look at his wife. She was sleeping contentedly. Taking the 2 plates he was given, he carried them into her room and woke her. Your mother says it's time for you to eat. No more sleeping now. Becky struggled into an upright position and took one of the plates. Good thing, because I'm starving. Chapter 6. When Amos went to work later that day, he took a note for Mrs. Franklin from Becky, letting her know about the baby and that they'd named her Annabelle, but would be calling her Belle. As soon as he'd left, her mother helped her to the water closet. I'll take care of the baby. You need to conserve your strength. I'm still a little worried about how much blood you lost. Becky nodded. I'll be the best patient I can possibly be. Her mother sighed. I raised you. I know how good that is, and your promise just isn't making me feel a whole lot better about things. I'll try to be a good example for Belle. I like that name. I could only find diapers for her. Where are her clothes? I couldn't even find a blanket. Becky burst into tears at her mother's words. I wanted to sew for her, but I was working all the time, and I didn't have any extra money at all for fabric. I bought some things last week, but Amos's mother came to visit, and I had to make curtains and tablecloths. Nothing is ready for her. Becky carefully sank back to her bed against her pillows, her face in her hands, crying. I'm already failing at being a mother, and she's not even a day old. Now, Becky, you know that's not what I'm saying. I'll get some sewing done right away. Where's the fabric you purchased? Becky pointed toward her sewing basket, which was in a corner of the room. I wanted to have everything just perfect, and I didn't think she'd be here for another 3 or 4 weeks. She had other plans. You rest, and I'm going to start sewing. It will be a privilege to sew for my granddaughter. Becky wiped away a tear. I don't know why everything is hitting me so hard. All I want to do is cry, but I'm so happy she's here. What you're experiencing is perfectly normal. I've never understood why, but I know that all new moms go through a period of emotional turmoil when they first deliver. Just like most women are very weepy through their pregnancies as well. So I'm normal? Becky asked, laughing and crying at the same time. Perfectly normal. Her mother sank down into the chair beside the bed and dug through the basket. I'm going to make her a gown from this. She held up some fabric. Becky smiled. That's what I got it for. I didn't think she'd be a girl. I don't know why, but this whole time I was sure she'd be a boy. Things rarely turn out the way we expect them to. Her mother patted her hand before finding a needle and a spool of thread in the basket. Let's see how fast I can make her something to wear. Hopefully she'll be sleeping in it later. Becky nodded sleepily, rolling to her side. Wake me if you need me. Several times throughout the day, her mother woke her to have her nurse the baby, but each time she went right back to sleep. The 4th time, she blinked a few times. What time is it? Almost 6. I have to get supper for Amos. Becky tried to get to her feet, but her mother put a hand on her shoulder. Supper is almost ready. You need to stay where you are. You'll be eating your meals in bed for a few days. We can't risk the bleeding starting up again. I may have to have Dr. JT come out and check on you. Becky shook her head. I'm fine, Mama. I promise. She leaned forward trying to see the baby. How's Belle? Is she okay? She's waking up about every 3 hours to eat, and then she goes back to sleep, just like she's supposed to. Her mother held up the gown she'd been sewing all day. What do you think? Becky nodded. It's beautiful. Thank you. It's the least I could do for my grandbaby. Her mother folded it and set it on the edge of the bed. I'm going to go get you some supper. I'll probably sit out there and eat with Amos. That's fine. I can handle the baby if she wakes. No, you can't. I don't want you lifting that baby at all. You can hold her if someone hands her to you, but you cannot stand up and pick up your baby. You can walk as far as the water closet with assistance. I'm stronger than you think I am. Promise me you'll wait for me if she wakes up. I don't care how hard it is to hear her cry. I will come and give her to you. I promise. Becky leaned back against the pillows, a little frustrated. She wasn't used to sitting around with nothing to do. Her mother could see the boredom on her face and handed her the sewing basket. Have fun. With those words, she was gone, and Becky sat quietly for a moment, digging through the basket. Becky wasn't sure how long she could sit quietly without hurting herself. She was used to working at least 10 hours every day between the restaurant and the boarding house. It had been easier since she'd married, but that had only been a week, and she'd kept herself very busy by choice, not by necessity. Her mother was back 15 minutes later, and she set Becky's soup on the dresser before plumping her pillows. I know you, and I know how hard-headed you are. You need to stay still for your daughter because she needs a mother. Handing Becky her soup, she disappeared from the room. Amos had a long day after very little sleep. He sent a telegram to his mother, knowing it would arrive in New York before she did. He brought home a little hat and a pair of booties that Mrs. Franklin had made for the baby. As soon as he walked inside the kitchen, he spotted her mother in front of the stove. How are my girls? The baby is doing just fine. Becky is. She's still weak. I'm having a hard time getting her to stay in bed. She wants to get up and help with the baby because she hates being idle. She's been this way since she was a little girl, but we can't let her risk herself. The baby needs her. Is it that serious? He asked, surprised. He knew her mother had been worried before the baby was born, but he was surprised she was still worried now. Yes, it's very serious. She lost a lot more blood than she should have, and she was a little too thin before the baby was born. She didn't get enough care while she was expecting, and I know you're thinking that's my fault, and it probably is. I can't change what happened months ago. I can only change how she thinks about things now. She needs to do what she's told. No lifting the baby. She needs to eat in bed. I feel like I'm letting her do too much by feeding herself. Should I get the doctor? Mrs. Brown considered the question for a moment. I'm thinking about it. If she's not more cooperative, then we're going to have to get him here. He can explain the very real dangers to her. I'll go get him now. Amos grabbed his hat off the hook on the wall and slammed it atop his head. He wasn't going to sit back and watch the woman he loved die simply because she didn't know how to sit still. Not yet. Let's give her till tomorrow. I think she can get it together, otherwise, you'll need to get him. Mrs. Brown frowned at him. Besides, you were up all night as well. You're dead on your feet. You were up most of the night, too. I had a chance to catnap. I slept in the chair beside Becky's bed and nodded off several times. You haven't had the chance to do that. And I plan to sleep all night. You'll be up and down taking the baby to Becky. He yawned, putting his hat back on the hook. Maybe I should hire someone to help us out after all. At least for this week. I'm sure you could. There are plenty of women in town who would like to help make ends meet for their families. We'll see how tomorrow goes. I'm not planning on working. I only went in today because I knew they were expecting me. With both of us here, I'm sure we can keep her in bed. It depends on how she's doing whether we'll need the doctor, though. Right now, I'm very worried about her. She finished dishing up their meal and set his on the table. If she's not better by morning, you can go for the doctor. That sounds fine. He sat down with her, bowing his head and saying a simple prayer, thanking God for the food and praying for the health of the two girls he loved the most. We'll just have to do what we can to keep Becky entertained. She seems to be nursing all right, and that's a blessing. He wanted to jump up from the table and go see her, but he didn't want to offend his mother-in-law either. Why are you helping us so much? He asked, still not sure why she was there with them. Mrs. Brown frowned. I'm helping because I love my daughter. My husband made me cut off ties with her when she told us she was pregnant, but I couldn't let her try to birth that baby with no help at all. Every woman should have someone with her when she delivers. Especially her first child. I would think any child, but I agree with you. She wanted me to try to help her, but I wouldn't have known what to do. You at least knew how much bleeding was too much and what to do for the bleeding. I wish there had been no bleeding, or there was a way to stop her from bleeding now. She shook her head. Maybe the doctor can put a poultice on her. If I'd been ready, I could have made one. I used to be a midwife. I guess I went to the right place, then, didn't I? He was thankful for the stranger who had suggested he go to her. You definitely did. She smiled at him. Are there going to be problems with your husband because you did this? He asked, worried about that for the first time. He still would have done exactly the same thing and gone to her, but he didn't want her to be in trouble with her husband for helping his wife out. I honestly don't know. Probably. But she's his daughter as well, and if he has a problem with it, then I'll go back to being a midwife. It won't bother me one little bit. Really? He asked. He was surprised to hear her say it. If you need a place to stay, we have extra rooms upstairs. Thank you. I hope it won't come to that, but if it does, I'll take you up on it. I'd make a great nanny for my grandbaby as well. He grinned. And just think. I was going to have to find one. There was a small cry from the back of the house, and she was on her feet in a moment, rushing through the house. She knew she had to hurry to keep Becky from picking the baby up. She wouldn't be able to listen to her daughter cry. Becky had never been able to listen to children cry without it upsetting her. When she reached her daughter's bedroom, Becky was on her feet beside the bed, her face pure white. Rebecca Lynn. I told you I'd get her. She grabbed onto Becky's arm, worried she'd fall, and called out, Amos. Amos was there quickly, and he scooped Becky up in his arms and carefully returned her to her bed. What were you thinking? Mrs. Brown picked up the infant and held her. Your mama's going to feed you in just a minute. I'm going to change your diaper first. Yes, I am. Her soft cooing made Amos smile. Why did everyone feel like they needed to talk that way to a baby? She took Belle from the room and brought her back a moment later with a clean diaper, wearing the new gown she'd made for her. Now I'll let your mama feed you. Amos was worried as Becky reached out for the baby. He could see how pale she still was, and it frightened him. Becky had seemed like the very picture of health when he'd met her less than 2 weeks before. She frowned at him as she unfastened the front of her gown to nurse the baby. I think maybe you should excuse yourself for a moment. Just cover up with this, her mother said, handing her a towel. Thank you. Becky covered herself and the baby's mouth, but kept Belle's eyes uncovered. She's so perfect. Every time she held the infant, she was amazed that something so beautiful had come from her. Amos watched her with the baby, and he couldn't help but smile. He could see her with many more children over the years. They would fill the house up, and they would live happily ever after. He didn't always believe in fairy tales, but that day, he needed to. Her mother slipped away into the kitchen to do the dishes, leaving the two of them there with the baby. I'll be back. Do not put the baby back in her cradle by yourself, she called back over her shoulder. Amos moved closer to Becky and the baby. Your mom is really worried about you. Becky shrugged. She worries more than she should sometimes. Women had babies every day. She didn't understand why there was fuss over her when she'd only done what all other women did. I'm worried, too. When I walked in here, your face was whiter than a sheet. It scared me. I don't mean to scare anyone. I just couldn't sit there and let my baby cry. For now, you're going to have to. Your mother is making it sound like Belle will grow up without you if you keep trying to push things so hard. Becky sighed. She's being overdramatic. No, I really don't think she is. Please be careful. I can't imagine raising that baby by myself. She needs her mama. Amos leaned forward and brushed his lips across Becky's. I don't want to live in fear that you'll die while I'm at work. I'm planning to take the rest of the week off to help your mom around here and be available if someone needs to go for the doctor. I'll be happy to have you here, she said softly. I like our time together. I love you. She couldn't say it yet, but she could think it. This man was quickly becoming her everything. So do I. We'll be able to bond with the baby together. She's going to have so many people fussing over her, she won't know which one to coo at first. Becky smiled. I'm sure she will. I'm glad. I want her to know she's loved and there will always be someone there for her. I'm sure she'll figure that out fast. Becky was still bleeding too heavily the following morning, so her mother sent Amos off for the doctor and Hannah. Either one or both, whoever needs to come to make sure my baby is all right. Amos rode as quickly as he could, stopping at the doctor's house and thankfully finding both JT and Hannah there. It's my wife, Becky, he said, panting as he stood in the doorway. He'd run from the horse. Hannah hurried over. I heard she had the baby, but her mother had to deliver it because she went into labor during the terrible storm Monday night. Yes, but her mother said she bled too much. We've been keeping her in bed as much as possible, but the bleeding is still bad. Her face is pure white. Hannah grabbed her bag, and so did the doctor. You'll help? She asked JT as she ran for the door. JT nodded. I'll saddle my horse if you'll saddle Hannah's. Amos handed his reins to Hannah. Just get out there. I'll ride yours. Hannah didn't question him, instead climbing onto the horse and riding away. She knew when she was needed. Amos followed JT into the barn, and the two of them worked in silence, saddling both horses and heading for the house. Amos couldn't believe just how nervous he was. Becky was listless and had even stopped complaining about having to stay in bed. He wasn't sure if that meant she was dying or what, but he knew it couldn't be good. Becky woke up to find Hannah standing over her. How are you feeling? Hannah asked her. Becky blinked up at her. Why are you here? I already had the baby. I know you did. Your mom just wanted me to come and check on you. She's getting really worried. She shouldn't worry. I'm fine. Becky felt like the nurse was two people for a moment. I feel a little funny. You just lie there and let me help you. Amos stared down at Becky, his heart full of sorrow. The doctor wasn't sure if she'd make it through the night, and he was unsure how he'd be able to live without her. He took her limp hand in his, bringing it to his lips. Please don't leave me, Becky Bowen. I love you more than I could ever begin to express. I think I knew from the moment I saw you in the boarding house that you were meant to be mine. Her eyes seemed to twitch, but they didn't open. I hope you can hear me. I need you to know I love you, whether you live or die, I will always love you. She'd been asleep for 3 days and nights. But it seemed like forever to him. If only she would say something to him. Anything? He needed to know she'd live. The baby cried, interrupting him. He walked to her and fed her a bottle. She was the only thing that could entice him to leave his wife's side. Belle was a part of Becky, and she may be the only part he had left. He needed them both. So very much. The next thing Becky knew, someone was standing over her, trying to get her to drink more water. Not thirsty, she said, pushing the cup away. You have to keep up your strength for the baby, Hannah said. Becky blinked. You're still here? I've come to see you every day this week. What? Becky tried to sit up, but her limbs were too weak. Belle? Your baby is fine. We had to use some infant food for her because you can't nurse her with as weak as you are, but she's taken to it well. Hannah sat down beside her. I'm going to check your bleeding. Becky nodded, waiting as Hannah checked her. Am I going to live? She asked, a cheeky grin on her face. Hannah sighed. You're joking, but it's been touch and go all week. You're going to be fine, I think, but you're going to need help for a month or two, with the baby, the cooking, and the housework. Becky groaned. I like to do for myself. You did a little too much of that while you were carrying the baby. Now it's time for you to let others do for you for a while. Hannah smiled. I'm going to go let your mother and your husband know that as long as you do as you're told, you're going to live. Are they really worried about that? Hannah nodded. We all were. A few minutes later, both Amos and her mother came into the room. Her mother was still wearing the same dress she'd worn the day she arrived. Mama, don't you think it's time you went home and got yourself some clean clothes? Her mother leaned down and kissed her cheek. I do think so. She turned to Hannah. I'm going to have to take Amos with me. Can we rely on you for just a little bit longer while we go and get my things? I'm going to need to be here for a good long while yet. Hannah nodded. Of course. I'll stay with Becky and the baby. Amos stood beside the bed for another moment, looking down at his wife. His beard was scraggly, and his eyes were red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept in a week. You need to take care of yourself, Amos. You look unwell. Becky wasn't sure why her words made everyone laugh so hard, but they did. Maybe they were all just a little tired. Chapter 7. Amos hitched up the wagon to drive Mrs. Brown to her house to collect more clothes. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he suspected strongly that she wanted him to go with her because she was afraid of what her husband would say or do. When they got to the ranch, there was no one in the house, so she hurried inside and collected her clothes and a few other personal items. She quickly wrote a note for her husband explaining the situation. He could see she was relieved as he held the door for her. When her husband appeared on the step just as they were about to leave, she froze. Becky's been very sick, Herbert. If I hadn't been there for the birth of the baby, she'd have died. We have a beautiful granddaughter. Herbert Brown stared right through his wife. You have a granddaughter. I have no family at all anymore. Anything you want, get now. He stood rigidly, waiting for her response. Now, Herbert, you know it doesn't have to be that way. Becky made a mistake, but she was married before the baby came. I know, no, Becky. Get your things or get out. Minerva looked at her son-in-law. Will you help me, Amos? Amos nodded. They were both exhausted because they'd taken turns sitting up with Becky for days, one of them always with her and the baby. Of course. He'd do whatever it took to help this woman who had saved his wife's life. Within 20 minutes, all of her personal items were gone from the house. She left everything he could possibly use and only took things that were hers and only hers. Goodbye, Herbert, she said softly as she left. She knew it would be the last time she saw her husband. He was too rigid in his beliefs to ever let her back after what he considered a betrayal. The entire way back to his home, Amos waited for his mother-in-law to say something. She had a home with them for as long as she needed it. When she said nothing and didn't shed a tear, he took that as a sign that the marriage really was over. Hannah was feeding the baby when they arrived, and Minerva immediately took the baby from her. I'll feed my granddaughter. She said the word granddaughter with so much pride that it made Amos feel as if he had a lump in his throat for a moment. I'll put your things in the room at the top of the stairs, he said softly, walking past them with his arms full of his mother-in-law's belongings. Hannah frowned at Minerva. It didn't go well? Nothing happened that I wasn't prepared for. Thank you so much for all the time you spent with my daughter this week. I think she's going to be fine now, thanks to you and Dr. JT. Hannah nodded. I'll swing by tomorrow to make sure she's all right, but I think she's over the worst of it. We'd all appreciate that. Becky waited until Hannah was gone before asking her mother what was happening. Father wouldn't let you come back? He told me he no longer has a family, which means me as well. He let me collect my things. Becky closed her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mama. Don't be. I knew what I was doing when I agreed to come here. Minerva looked down into the face of the baby greedily, sucking on a bottle in her arms. You and my grandbaby mean more to me than being a prisoner in my own home. Becky decided to let the topic of conversation go. May I hold her and feed her for a moment? She wasn't sure if she was still considered too sick for that, but she was feeling stronger by the minute, and her arms ached to be able to hold her baby. Her mother frowned for a moment before putting little Belle in her arms. How old is she now? She was a week old yesterday. Becky blinked a few times, thinking about the days she'd lost being so ill. I had no idea. Thank you so much for being here and taking care of her. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. The two of you mean the world to me. Her mother smiled at her, making it clear she meant what she said. I'll leave you alone for a minute while I go and get my new bedroom straightened out. Becky watched her mother leave, looking down at her child. It seemed I'd never get to hold you, and now that you're here, other people have held you far more than I have. Don't worry, Belle, your mama is fine now, and I'm going to keep you with me forever. Amos stepped into the room, sitting down on the edge of the bed with his wife and daughter. I'm so glad you're back with us. I was afraid we were going to lose you. She smiled. I'm tougher than I look. You keep saying that. I'm still going to worry. He looked at the ceiling, and she knew he was thinking of her mother. It was bad for your mom. Your father made it clear she was never welcome to come back. She's going to stay with us, at least for a while. Are you all right with that? I am. She saved your life. I'll pay her a wage if she'll let me, because you're going to need a lot of help around here. He couldn't imagine letting her try and keep house at the moment, and he knew she wouldn't let things get dirty. She would need to be up and moving around. I think that would be nice. Thank you for being willing to let her stay here. It means a lot to me. Becky wondered if he had any idea just how much his support through this difficult time meant to her. She's done a lot for us, so we need to help her out here. She can stay as long as she wants to be here. He stroked her cheek. I was so worried about you. Becky frowned. I didn't mean to scare anyone. Well, that's what happens when you sleep for 6 days. He smiled at her, leaning down and brushing her lips with his. He couldn't begin to express how afraid he'd been, so he didn't try. My mother has taken good care of you. She's had every meal done right on time. Not that he'd cared. He'd barely been able to eat with her being so ill. He'd done his best, though. Now that she was better, he'd have to get back to work. Thankfully, her mother would be there to take care of her. We got a telegram from my mother saying she made it home safely, and she'd be back soon to meet her grandchild. Oh, wonderful. I can't wait. She said the words in a deadpan voice, letting him know how much she really didn't want his mother there. He laughed out loud, feeling like it had been years since he'd had reason to laugh. Sarcasm becomes you, my dear. Becky was forced to spend the rest of the week in bed, her strength coming back gradually and not in the big doses she wanted to see. The highlights of her days were the times when Belle was placed in her arms to be fed. She protested from the first day that she couldn't do much, but she could feed her baby, and she wasn't going to let any able-bodied people waste their time doing what she could. At the end of the day on Friday, the doctor came and announced she was well enough to sit on the sofa if she was carried there, so Amos lifted her into his arms and put her on the sofa, arranging a pillow behind her for her comfort. As the doctor was leaving, he promised, if you're still improving on Monday, you'll be able to start helping with the housework. Not more than 10 minutes at a time until your strength is built up, but I do think you'll be ready. Becky couldn't believe just how excited she was about being able to get up and clean her house herself. Her mother was an excellent housekeeper, but she still saw little spots of dust from her vantage point that she wanted to eradicate the first moment she could. It was almost an obsession. Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate the care you've taken with me. All in a day's work, Mrs. Bowen. JT tipped his hat and left the house, heading home to his new wife, a smile on his lips. After he was gone, her mother came from the kitchen. Would you like to eat in here? Or back in bed, she asked Becky. Becky shook her head. I'm staying here for as long as I possibly can. I'm done with that bed forever. Amos laughed. You say that, but you'll be ready to go back for a nap in an hour or two. You're still as weak as a 2-day-old kitten. She made a face at her husband, immediately regretting it when she saw the look on her mother's face. She sighed. Having her mother live with them was a great idea for the moment, but in a week or two, it would be harder. She couldn't react as naturally as she wanted to her husband with her mother there. He opted to eat in the parlor with her, each of them sitting with a big bowl of stew. Be careful not to spill, her mother scolded as she disappeared back into the kitchen. The whole time the baby was growing as well as could be expected. She'd taken to the infant food better than anyone had hoped for, and there were no problems with her not being able to tolerate it. By Monday, Becky was walking a few steps when she needed to, going to the water closet without any assistance, and helping with cooking. Her mother wouldn't let her stand up, so she was sitting at the table peeling potatoes. When the doctor came, he proclaimed her fit to stand for up to 10 minutes at a time and suggested she spend some time on the back porch swing. At his words, she stood and hurried to the back porch. Sure enough, Amos had added a swing while she was ill, and she sat down there, soaking up the sun. Having some of her freedom back did a great deal for her disposition as well. It took some of the work off of her mother, and she was able to think for the first time since her discussion with Becky's father. Minerva carried the baby outside and sat in the swing beside her daughter after seeing the doctor off. I don't want to stay with you forever, she said without warning. Becky looked at her mother. What do you want to do? I'm going to be a midwife again. It's obvious that there aren't enough qualified medical professionals in town. I can help. Looking at the baby in her arms, Minerva sighed. I had forgotten just what a joy it brings me to hold a child as they breathe their first breath. I will be as big a part of your life as you want me to be, but I'm not going to live with a newlywed couple. You and Amos deserve privacy as you learn to be a family. You can stay until other arrangements are made. I think I'll need you for a while yet. You will. I just talked to the doctor about that. He thinks I should stay here for at least another month. After he's given you permission to return to all normal activities, I'm going to be on my way. I might talk to your Mrs. Franklin and live in the boarding house. It sounds like she was good to you. Did I just hear my name? A voice asked from below the porch. Mrs. Franklin. Becky carefully got to her feet and hugged the older woman as she climbed up onto the porch with them. It's so good to see you. I don't care nothing about seeing you, Becky. I'm here to look at that baby of yours. Becky grinned. I want you to meet my mother as well. Mom, this is Mrs. Franklin. Mrs. Franklin, my mother, Mrs. Minerva Brown. Mrs. Franklin nodded cordially, but Becky could see the anger on her face. Hello. It's so nice to meet you. Becky has told me wonderful things about all the help you gave her. Minerva held the baby out for the other woman to see. Someone had to help her out. Her parents abandoned her. That's true. We did. I wanted to let her stay, but my husband wouldn't let me. I can understand very well why you'd judge me harshly for that. Minerva held her head up, but there was sorrow in her eyes. Mrs. Franklin, Mama came here to help me when I was in labor. I would have died without her. My father has kicked her out now. Mrs. Franklin's entire demeanor changed. I'm sorry to hear it. Her hand rested on the other woman's arm. Consider me a friend. Minerva smiled at that. I was just telling Becky that it would be nice if I could have the same arrangement she had with you. I am going to start midwifing again, but it's been a lot of years, so it may take me a while to build up my business. Mrs. Franklin nodded. You just let me know when you're ready. Becky's old room is still empty, and I'll save it for you. The doctor thinks I'll need to be here for at least another month until Becky is on her feet again. She's had a really rough time of it. I wish you'd let me know. I'd have been here to help out. Becky smiled sweetly. There was no reason to bother you. My mother came and stayed to help me out. By the time she leaves, I'll be ready to stand on my own 2 feet again. Minerva looked between the two, realizing that this woman had been a substitute mother for her daughter when she'd been unavailable. I'm going to leave you two alone. The baby's ready for her nap. Mrs. Franklin took the spot beside Becky on the porch swing. Are things really all right between your mother and you? They're so much better. She stood up to my father, and he now says he has no family at all. That's sad, but it's his choice. I can't imagine anyone rejecting you and that beautiful baby. I got your note. You're calling her Belle? Yes, it means beautiful. Everything about that little girl is beautiful to me. Becky leaned her head against the back of the swing. Just think, a month ago I was wondering what I was going to do when the baby came and how I'd be able to work. Now I'm sitting here on a porch swing rocking while someone else takes care of my baby, and my husband will be home before long. How's it going with Amos? He's wonderful. He loves the baby so much. The first time he held her, you could just see on his face how much he cared for her. His mother is supposed to be here again soon, and I'm not looking forward to that, but Amos is so much more than I ever dreamed he'd be. You're in love with him, aren't you? Becky nodded. It's so different than the love I felt for Cliff that I didn't recognize it at first. Now I can't imagine ever not loving him. I'm glad you accepted his offer. It was very smart of you. I can't think of anything that would have been better for me or my baby. Amos walked up on the porch then, smiling at Becky. You're on the porch. What did the doctor say? He said I can stand for as much as 10 minutes at a time, and I should enjoy the porch swing and the sunshine. That's wonderful. He smiled at Mrs. Franklin. It's good to see you here. You should have come to get me when she was so ill, Mrs. Franklin told him. I would have if I hadn't been needed every minute of every day. We were taking turns sleeping, her mother, Hannah, and me. It was a rough few days, but we all made it through. He smiled at her. I promise that I will get you if she gets ill again if there's any way possible. Good, because I consider this girl one of my own. She hefted her bulk off the swing. I'm going back to town now. I'll see you soon. With that she was gone, and Amos took her place on the swing. Do you really feel all right? He asked. She nodded. I feel so much better than I have been. It's so nice to be outside on a beautiful spring day, knowing my daughter is inside napping, while my mother watches over her. I feel like everything in my life is better now that Belle is here. He stretched his arm around her shoulders. It's nice to have a minute alone. I feel like people are always around us. My mother told me today that she's only going to stay as long as I need her. She's going to have the same arrangement with Mrs. Franklin as I had, and Mrs. Franklin has agreed to keep my room empty for her. How much longer will that be? I enjoy having your mother here, and she's definitely been a godsend, but I'd like to be alone with my wife and daughter as well. Another month probably, but my activities will gradually increase over that time. Just don't overdo it. Lean on her as much as you can. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. I will when I can. I do need to build up my stamina so I can take care of you and Belle. What will we do if I just sit around for the next month and I'm still not strong enough to do what I need to do when she leaves? You'll just have to do your best, I guess. He kissed her cheek. I'm glad you're feeling so much better. It's nice to have you up and moving around and smiling again. It's nice to be moving around and smiling again. He stood, holding a hand down for her. Let's go see if your mother needs help with supper. I'm home a little early because I needed to know what the doctor had said. The men are getting used to working without me there. Is that good or bad? She asked, a twinkle in her eye. It's always nice to feel needed, but in this case, it was very good. I know that I can be gone for a few days at a time and my business won't fall down around my ears. He smiled. I brought you a present from town. She smiled at that. You're always bringing me presents from town. You're going to really like this one. I always really like all of them. Go wait in the kitchen, and I'll bring it in. She laughed, walking into the kitchen and sitting on a chair there. Do you need some help with supper, Mama? No, I'm good. What has you in such a good mood? Amos brought me another present. It seems like he's bringing me presents every day. That man courts me more than Cliff ever did. Becky felt a coldness emanate from her mother at Cliff's name. You never liked him. No, I never really did, and that wasn't just your father talking. I watched him with you, and he didn't treat you the way I wanted my daughter treated. He didn't take special care with you like Amos does. Amos is a man I want my daughter to spend the rest of her life with. I have a feeling you're going to get your wish. I wasn't sure when we first discussed marriage, but now I know I couldn't spend my life with anyone else. He's too special to me. Amos walked into the kitchen then. I actually have 2 presents for you. There's this one, he said, handing her a skein of yarn and knitting needles. This one is to keep you busy, so you won't drive everyone around you crazy. And then there's this one. He pulled a long velvet-covered box from his pocket and handed it to her. This is for giving me the most beautiful daughter in the world. Becky opened the box and gasped when she saw the necklace there. It's beautiful, Amos. Maybe you can wear it to church when we're able to go again. It would please me to see it around your neck. She stood up and wrapped her arms around him. You're the best husband a girl could ever ask for. Her mother discreetly left the room, giving them the alone time they needed. Chapter 8. Amos took to working half-days while Becky was recovering. It wasn't that her mother couldn't handle things on her own. It was obvious she could. He wanted to be as involved in his wife's life as he could be, and he didn't want to miss a single moment of Belle's infancy. He spent a lot of time working around the house, getting it painted and building a small barn. Every time he held Belle, he felt just a little bit more in love with her, if that was even possible. His love for her had been monumental from the moment he'd looked at her sweet little face. Before going into the house each afternoon, after working on the barn, he'd stop and pick wildflowers for Becky, wanting new flowers in the center of the table so she'd have something pretty to look at. By 3 weeks after Belle's birth, she was able to stand up to 30 minutes at a time, and she was doing more of the housework and caring for the baby. On Monday night, Minerva waited until Becky was asleep before talking with Amos. I think it's time for me to move on. You're here half-days and Becky is more than capable of cooking supper, keeping up with the housework, and taking care of Belle. I'm just in the way. He frowned. I'm not sure. Will you stay another week? Please? I'll pay you if you need me to. It's not money. I don't want to be in the way during this special time. You two haven't been married long at all, and the baby is still so new. Enjoy each other. We are. I promise. I will worry a lot more if you leave this week. 1 more week, please. Minerva finally nodded. All right. 1 more week, but then I'm moving into Creed and staying in the boarding house. I'm sure I can help out Mrs. Franklin. I don't like not being useful. Are you going to get a divorce? He asked. It had been on his mind a lot that she'd given up her life for his rigid neighbor, and he wanted her to be able to move on. Becky was still heartbroken over the entire situation. I really don't know. She rubbed the back of her neck. I feel like I should try to make things work because I was married for more than 20 years, but it's clear he doesn't want anything to do with me if I chose Becky and Belle over him. She shrugged. I didn't pick them over him really. I just chose to help them live, and that was too much for him. If you want to go try to talk to him, I'll come with you. You just let me know. Minerva patted Amos's hand. You're a good man. I appreciate all the help you've given me, and I really appreciate knowing you'll always take care of Becky and Belle. They need a good man with them. She got to her feet. Good night, Amos. I'll see you in the morning. Amos watched her walk away, and he realized she felt badly because her marriage was ending, but he wondered what else was going through her mind. She obviously felt badly because she wasn't keeping her commitments. Did it have anything to do with love? He hoped he and Becky never became like her parents. When he slipped into bed, he pulled Becky toward him and kissed her forehead. It's never going to be like that for us, he whispered. She asked, her eyelashes fluttering. Never mind. Go back to sleep. He watched her face as she fell back to sleep, still cradled against him. His whole entire world was asleep in the room with him, and his heart was full. The following afternoon, while Amos was working on the barn, he saw an unfamiliar buggy pull up to the house. He got down from the ladder he'd been standing on to work on the roof, using his hand to shield his eyes from the sun. When he realized who was there, he took a deep breath for confidence before walking over to greet the woman. "Hello, Mother. I thought you were going to let me know before you came back." He wasn't surprised she'd come with no notice, but he was irritated with her. He knew she'd upset the household, and Becky was just starting to get better. "You know I couldn't wait to see my grandbaby." She took the hand he offered to help her down from the buggy. "My bags are in the back, Amos." She walked toward the house, and he decided not to say anything, simply grabbing her bags and following her inside. When he walked into the house, he was surprised to see his mother-in-law standing toe-to-toe with his mother. "You will not upset my daughter or my grandbaby. She's been through a lot, and we weren't even certain she was going to live for a while. You have no business visiting unannounced." His mother crossed her arms over her chest. "That baby is my grandbaby just as much as she is yours. I deserve to have a relationship with her." Amos froze for a moment, wondering what Minerva would say to that, but it seemed that she knew his mother wasn't to be told the truth. "But you don't have the right to disturb the entire household to form that relationship. My daughter has been very ill, and she is napping while the baby sleeps. You may see the baby after both of them are awake and not a minute before." "No one told me she was ill," his mother insisted. "Mother, I didn't want to worry you," Amos said. "Becky lost a lot more blood when the baby was born than she should have, and we didn't think we'd be able to stop the bleeding." He hoped he could make the stubborn woman understand why Becky's peace of mind was so crucial, but she rarely had the ability to think of others. "But you did." "We did, but we almost lost her several times. You may see the baby after she wakes up. If we catch you waking either of them, I will have to ask you to move to the hotel in town or go home to New York." He wasn't going to let his mother affect his wife or child. His mother huffed out a breath of air angrily. "You make it sound like I'm an evil person, wanting to hurt her and the baby, when we both know that's not true at all. I think Becky is a dear child." Amos closed his eyes and counted to 10. "You'll be in the room to the left at the top of the stairs. I want the room to the right. The room I was in last time. Minerva is staying in that room. Since she's kept this household going for the past 3 weeks, she gets to keep her room, and you can switch to the one across the hall." At that moment, Amos almost wanted her to argue with him so he could tell her to go stay in town. He was finished with her nonsense. "Fine. Carry my things up, Amos." Her face was filled with anger, and she obviously thought her comforts were more important than anyone else's. Amos wasn't worried what his mother thought. She had come unexpectedly, and he wasn't going to kowtow to her. Not now, and not ever. As she headed for the stairs, she looked over her shoulder and asked Minerva, "What are you planning on serving for supper?" "I've had terrible food on the train, and I need something good this evening." Minerva smiled sweetly. "I'll fix something. Enjoying it will be entirely up to you." Amos took his mother's things to her room before heading back downstairs to talk to Minerva. Someone needed to apologize for his mother, and he knew she wasn't about to do it. "Minerva, I'm so very sorry about my mother. She is not always a kind person, and you caught her at her worst today. She hates travel, and she resents the fact that to see me, she has to get on a train. She's just plain mean-spirited and selfish. It's hard for me to believe that a man as loving and giving as you are came from her." Minerva angrily mashed the potatoes in the pot in front of her. She was obviously taking her aggression out on their supper. "Thank you for not telling her the baby isn't really mine. She would never understand why I feel as if Belle should be raised as if she was mine. No, I can see a woman like her would never understand." "Well, don't let her make you angry. If you need me, I'll be here. I'll make sure not to work while she's staying with us, but I hope to get her back to New York as quickly as humanly possible. It's not like she's going to help around the house and make things easier for any of us." She should. I can't imagine a grown woman coming into a situation like this and not doing everything she can to be helpful. He laughed. I don't think my mother has ever cooked a meal in her life. I know she doesn't so. She's always been surrounded by servants. She hasn't needed to learn any housekeeping or cooking skills. She's a pampered socialite. He'd always felt sorry for anyone marrying one of his sisters, who had been raised to be the same type of selfish person his mother was. Minerva sighed heavily. I'll just keep telling myself that she isn't here for long and that she raised a fine son. I'll get through it. And I probably won't even have to throw vegetables at her head. He grinned. If you do throw vegetables at her head, would you try to remember to take them out of the jar first? She laughed, picturing the scene if she didn't remove them from their jars first. Just thinking about that will keep me going. You're a good man, Amos Bowen. Mother can be a good person, too. She heads charitable committees and helps the poor a great deal. She gets other people to do the actual work. How could he convince anyone his mother was a good person when he wasn't quite sure he believed it himself? She sounds like an absolutely delightful woman. As long as she isn't causing my daughter any trouble. She started fixing 3 plates. Go and wake Becky and tell her it's supper time. I know she needs her sleep, but right now, she needs her meals a tad bit more. I will. He hurried through the house and opened the door to the bedroom he shared with Becky. Walking to the edge of the bed, he sat down and put his hand on her arm. Becky, it's time for supper. He loved watching her sleep, and he hated to disturb her when he knew she needed rest. Supper? She rolled to her side facing him. I'm sleepy. Your mother says you need food more than sleep. Becky sighed heavily. Sounds like Mama. She hid a yawn behind her hand. All right. Let's go eat supper. I have to tell you something first. He bit his lip, trying to figure out the best way to tell her that his mother had returned. We had an unexpected visitor this afternoon. My father? Her voice sounded excited at the prospect. I hate that my parents split up over me. He shook his head. I'm sorry, it wasn't your father. It's my mother. Becky closed her eyes for a moment, not wanting to think about it. Her father was the person she would have most wanted to see, and his mother, the one she least wanted to see. How are she and my mother getting along? About as poorly as you'd expect. I really think one of us should be between them at all times. Just what we need right now, isn't it? It took all of her energy to take care of the baby and herself. Dealing with his mother was just going to drag her down. He sighed, shaking his head. I don't even know what to say to that. He leaned down and brushed her lips with his. Mother knows you've been ill, and she promised to not upset you. Want to bet how long it takes her to break that promise? She giggled. That's not very nice, neither is she. He got up and held a hand down to help her to her feet. Just as they were both standing, the baby started to cry. Of course she cries now. I was just smelling your mother's supper, and it smells wonderful. I'm hungry. Becky laughed. I can feed her, but I need food more than sleep, remember? She gave him an impish grin and left the room, knowing he'd pick up the baby. She wasn't allowed to lift her yet, but she could hold her if someone handed the baby to her. He shook his head as she left, very amused that she was taking advantage of the situation, even a little. It had been so hard to keep her from doing too much that it was a welcome change. He picked up the baby and carefully changed her diaper, something that had frightened him just weeks ago was like second nature now. Carrying her into the kitchen, he talked softly to her the whole while, wondering who would win the fight over who got to feed the baby, him or Minerva. At mealtimes, the fights were almost brutal. Each of them wanted the other to be able to eat the food while it was hot. Becky was already seated at the table, knowing there was no point in her even getting involved in the bickering that took place when Belle woke up at mealtime. Everyone was certain she was on the brink of starvation, though she felt a little better each day. Apparently, Amos won the silent struggle between husband and mother-in-law, and he sat at the table with the others, feeding the baby while they ate. No one had called his mother down to supper, and Becky wasn't sure if it was an oversight or deliberate, but she did know it was a much quieter and nicer meal without her. When the baby was fed, she was passed off to Minerva, who ate one-handed, while Amos applied himself to his meal. He had just taken the first few bites when his mother came down the stairs. "No one told me it was supper time." "Hello, Mrs. Bowen," Becky said softly. "Please join us. We didn't want to disturb your rest after your long days of travel." Mrs. Bowen stared at Becky for a moment. "You don't look half dead." "I was made to understand you almost died." "That's what they tell me. I'm getting stronger every day, though. Thank you so much for asking after my health. It's very kind of you." Becky continued eating, knowing she needed to get as much into her as she could, and she couldn't let her mother-in-law put her off food. Mrs. Bowen started to say something, but she stopped. "You're welcome." She walked to the stove and served herself a plate of food, surprising them all. "I didn't even know you knew how to serve yourself, Mother," Amos said. "Don't get cheeky with me," she said, sitting down and applying herself to her meal. She looked at the baby Minerva was holding. "Does she have all her fingers and toes?" Minerva nodded, refusing to talk to the woman who had been so rude to her. Amos answered her, knowing it was the only way to keep the peace. "She's perfect in every way. The most beautifully perfect baby in the whole world." Mrs. Bowen's face softened for a moment. Every father thinks that about his own child. She looked at the baby who was held against Minerva's shoulder. "I'd like to hold her after I finish eating." "That would be fine, Mrs. Bowen," Becky said softly. "I'd like you to get to know her. She's a sweet baby. She only cries when she's hungry, and she's a good sleeper. All blessings, I'm sure." Mrs. Bowen focused her attention on her son. "When are you going to hire a nanny to take care of her? She needs to be raised right." Amos sighed. "Things aren't done that way around here. Becky will take care of her. There's no reason for her not to. How will Becky take her rightful place in society if she's caring for a child all the time? There really isn't a society to take her place in here. It's a relatively small mining community. People are struggling to put enough food on the table, not going to society balls." Amos knew his mother would never understand the type of world he now lived in, but he wasn't sure it mattered either. He was happy where he was, and so was Becky. "Well, then you need to move back to New York. You're depriving your daughter of a proper upbringing. And your wife has a right to take her place in society where she belongs. Why would you even consider living here?" His mother shook her head at him, acting as if he'd lost his mind. "I built this house with my own two hands after designing it. This is where I'll raise my family. Thank you for your opinions. I will make note of them." As soon as supper was over, Becky stood up to help clear the table. Her mother handed the baby to Amos and walked over to wash the dishes while Becky dried. He held her as if she was made to be in his arms and patted her back gently. His mother frowned at Becky. "I thought she was too sick to be doing housework. Why isn't her mother doing it all?" Becky closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control her temper. "My mother has been doing most of what gets done around this house, but I need to be useful. I'm not used to sitting idly while others do work for me. You should get used to it. You have a new baby. If you're not going to have a nanny take care of her, you should at least have someone who will clean and cook for you. It's that simple." Mrs. Bowen looked at her son. "Which will you get her? A nanny or a housekeeper? If she wants either one, she only has to ask for it. Until that happens, I'll thank you to mind your own business." Becky heard his response, and she bit her lip to keep from laughing out loud. He'd told her like it was, and she'd loved hearing him do it. Hopefully she'd back off now. Becky's mother-in-law was a busybody, and she didn't want her around. At all. Chapter 9. By lunch Thursday, Mrs. Bowen was losing her mind with boredom. "All you people do around here is chores and take care of the baby. Don't you ever do anything fun?" She pushed her food around on her plate. "I have never been so bored in all my life. We haven't been shopping once." Amos sighed. Becky isn't strong enough to go shopping, and her mother is here to take care of her. I can drive you into town this afternoon if you just can't stand another minute of being cooped up inside the house. He would prefer it if she'd help out with the chores or find some way to occupy herself, but he knew he was asking the impossible. That would be lovely. She stood up. Give me a minute to put on my shopping dress and hat, and I'll be down and ready to go. As soon as she was gone, Becky looked at her husband. Find a way to lose her, would you? Are there still kidnappers in town that you could parade her in front of? She grinned as she made the suggestion, knowing she was being cheeky, but sometimes she couldn't help but want her mother-in-law to just go away. They'd bring her back, he said with a groan. Minerva gasped at her daughter's words. Rebecca Lynn. I did not raise you to be so vindictive. Sorry, Mama. I should know better. You're right. Becky decided to pretend to be apologetic to appease her mother. They all knew the old harridan deserved every word they said about her. You should ride into town with us. I think the sunshine would do you good. Amos wasn't looking forward to the ride with just his mother, but if Becky was there, it would be so much better. Becky frowned for a moment. I need to help Mama with the dishes. I think Amos is right. You should go with them. It'll be good for you. You don't have to get out and shop. You can just sit in the wagon and soak up all the sun you can. Becky looked between her mother and Amos, knowing both of them expected her to refuse. You know what? I think I will go. It sounds lovely. She got up and went into the bedroom to make sure her hair was fixed and her dress looked clean. She changed quickly because the baby had spit up on her, and when she looked in the mirror again, she thought she wouldn't shame her husband. When she walked back out into the parlor, Amos was waiting with his mother. Let's go, Becky said, a smile on her face. I need some fresh air. Every time she'd gone to sit on the porch all week, his mother had joined her there, ruining the experience for her. Amos offered Becky his arm, and they walked out to where he'd hitched up the wagon while she got ready. He helped her up, and she sat in the middle between his mother and Amos. What are you wanting to shop for? Becky asked. Oh, I thought a nice doll for the baby. Mrs. Bowen had yet to call the baby by her name because she said Belle was an object, not a baby's name. Becky frowned. You could probably find that at the Mercantile. There are no doll stores in this town of yours? There's a beautiful store that sells dolls on Madison Avenue. You should really visit New York, Becky. If you did, you'd find this town of yours very lacking. Mrs. Bowen pulled her gloves on tighter as she spoke. Oh, I don't know. I've lived in Creed my whole life. I think I might find New York overwhelming, rather than being disappointed in Creed. Becky looked straight ahead as they passed her father's ranch. He was standing out front and seemed to be frowning at her. I suppose the Mercantile will have to do. I'll see if I can find a doll that would be worthy of my granddaughter. Amos shook his head. You do realize that at the moment all your granddaughter does is eat, drool, and soil her diapers, right? Must you be so crude? I did not raise you to speak that way. No, but then you didn't raise me, did you? The nanny took care of that. Amos was getting so tired of his mother's superior attitude, he wanted to shove her on a train back to New York. As is the custom in all good households. Mrs. Bowen gripped the seat as they went over a deep rut in the road. Someone needs to repair these roads. Amos didn't respond. He was ready to get to town and have a few minutes away from his mother. He would stay in the wagon with his wife. You should really get a buggy. There's so much more genteel. When they pulled up in front of the Mercantile, Mrs. Bowen waited for him to get out and help her down. Amos? How long are you going to keep me waiting? He wanted to make her get down on her own, but the truth was, he had been raised better than that, whether by his mother or a nanny. He ran around the wagon and helped her down, climbing back up beside his wife. Do you think if I put a frog in her bed, she'd go back to New York sooner? He asked. Becky giggled. If I thought it would work, I'd help you find one. They enjoyed their time just sitting in the wagon, watching the people who walked past them. There go Pastor Eugene and his new wife Benita, Amos said. Have you ever seen a newlywed couple argue that much? Never. Becky said with a sigh. I really think they're going to kill one another one of these days if they can't find a way to live peacefully. 10 minutes later, Mrs. Bowen rushed out of the store looking furious. She didn't wait for Amos to help her up, instead climbing up beside Becky. Drive, Amos. She held no packages, which surprised them both. Where to? You're home, please. Amos and Becky exchanged a glance, wondering what her problem was. As soon as they were out of town, and more importantly out of earshot of others, Mrs. Bowen began to yell. Why did that pastor and his wife talk about the two of you marrying when Becky was almost ready to give birth? They said, and I quote, "It's a good thing they married when they did." I heard Becky had her little bastard not a week later. Becky felt her stomach drop. She had no idea how to respond. It's true, Mother. I married Becky a week before Belle was born. Do you have a problem with that? Amos kept his voice calm. He was obviously not going to let his mother get the best of him. Why didn't you tell me that baby wasn't yours? They said her real father is nothing but a coal miner. I'm Belle's real father. I held her when she was first born. I wake up with her every night. I married her mother, knowing full well she was on the way, and I was excited about her from the moment Becky said she'd marry me. I am her real father. You let me travel all this way thinking that child was my granddaughter. And she's not. If you accept me as your son, you'll accept Belle as your granddaughter. If you don't want to accept her, you can get right back on a train and return to New York where you belong. Amos's voice was low, but there was no question about whether he meant every word he said. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Amos. If you can't see the difference between this floozy you married and a decent, respectable woman who would give you children of your own, then I'm happy to leave. Amos stopped the wagon right there in the middle of the road. You will apologize to my wife, the woman I love, or you will walk. Well, I never. Mrs. Bowen replied furiously. You've never apologized for any of the evil things you've said to people. That's very true. You'll apologize now or walk. You have 5 seconds. I won't do it. Then get down and walk. I won't be taking you back into town either. He watched her for a moment. Go. Instead, his mother closed her eyes for a moment. I apologize for being rude to you, Becky. Becky didn't know how to even respond to that. All right. It seemed to be best. She wasn't going to tell her she forgave her because she knew the apology was not given freely. Now take me to your home, let me pack my things, and take me to the hotel in town. I can find my way back to New York. Fine. Amos started driving again, heading to the house. He wanted her gone just as soon as possible. He put his hand on Becky's knee. He needed to let her know that he supported her fully, and nothing his mother said would ever sway him. Becky felt paralyzed. She was afraid to say anything to anger the woman beside her even more, but she didn't ever want to look at her again either. Hopefully she really would go back to New York and never bother them again. When they got back to the house, Mrs. Bowen went upstairs, and Becky sought out her mother, speaking in low tones of what had happened. Amos waited with the wagon for his mother to come back out to him. He wouldn't carry her bags or help her at all. He was finished with the way she'd treated good people. After her mother-in-law was gone, Becky allowed the tears to fall. People in town are still talking about me. I had hoped they'd all stop when I married Amos. Who was talking about you? Becky made a face. Pastor Eugene and his viper-tongued wife. Rumor has it they married because they were caught in a compromising position, and he's a pastor. But they still feel like they should drag me through the mud. Becky looked down at her hands. Mrs. Bowen called Belle a bastard. Her mother frowned at that. No one is going to call my grandbaby that. You were married before she was born, and that means she's technically not a bastard, no matter what anyone says. I know that's how father feels. I was the apple of his eye, and then I got pregnant, and he hasn't looked at me since. He was standing out front when we drove past on the way to Creed today, and I swear I felt his eyes looking right through me. Am I going to spend the rest of my life paying for one mistake with a man I was planning to marry just a few days later? Looking directly at her daughter, Minerva said, "You might. There's really a very good chance that you will. You are a good mother, and I know you were very much in love with Cliff when you got pregnant with Belle. But you have to understand that people will criticize you for your actions for the rest of your life. There's no getting around it. Now most people will be understanding, and in a few years people might forget, but if you stay in Creed, where people have known you your whole life, you're running the risk of being talked about." Becky sighed. "I love Creed. It's my home. I love this house that Amos built with his own 2 hands. How could I want anything else in life than to stay here and be happy? I want my little girl to play in the same places that I played." "Is that too much to ask?" Her mother shook her head. "No, I really don't think it is. But for some, it's too much to ask that they not talk about your indiscretion." "All right. I guess I need to deal with that then, don't I?" "Yes, you probably do." Herbert Brown was doing what he did best. He was dealing with his cattle and doing spring roundup. He had his employees at his side, loyal men who would never go off and get pregnant or choose the side of someone who had over his. Becky had always known that he would not accept any type of disloyalty. What had she thought would happen when she told them she was expecting 2 months after her fiancé was in the ground? He rode harder than any of his men, though he was years older. He expected the same work ethic from everyone around him that he had himself. People called him hard, but he wasn't. He just expected the same morals and standards from the people around him that he expected from himself. Was that too much to ask? At the end of the day, he went into the house, wondering what he was going to make for his supper. He had never learned to cook, because he had a wife to do it for him. Sometimes he ate with the ranch hands, but it was embarrassing when they all looked at him, wondering how he'd run his wife off. Why couldn't anyone understand that he needed things a certain way, and he wouldn't put up with anything less? He stood in the kitchen, slicing off strips of bacon, standing in his bare feet because his wife had always hated it when he tracked mud into her house. He missed her every moment of every day, but he couldn't bend enough to let her back in. His love for her had been stronger than his anger with her, and he'd almost told her she could stay, but he couldn't get the words out of his mouth. His wife had betrayed him by going to their daughter, and keeping that in his head was always for the best. He made a particularly violent slicing motion with the knife and dropped it. It cut through his pant leg and into his calf, landing point down into his foot. He leaned down and pulled it out of his foot as he watched the blood flow freely from his wound onto the floor. He fell to the floor, wondering how he'd gotten himself into this position. There was already a puddle of blood on the floor, and he knew there was no way anyone would find him before he bled out. He scooted along the floor to the table and pulled down the tablecloth, wrapping it around his leg. It was Minerva's good tablecloth, and he knew she'd not be happy if she saw him bleeding all over it, but he couldn't think of another way to stop the bleeding. "You're bleeding, and you can think of no one but the woman you love. Yet you kicked her out of your house? What is wrong with you?" There was a man standing across the kitchen from him, frowning down at him. Herbert had never seen the man before, but there was a glow behind him that told Herbert he was no ordinary man. "Who are you? What does it matter? You care about nothing more than your own rigid sense of justice. You lay there bleeding, and you think of the woman you love, but you don't wish she was with you. You still think you did the right thing asking her to leave, because she saved your daughter's life. You have a good woman and a beautiful love. She stood beside you all these years when you wouldn't allow her to be a midwife or anything but a wife and mother. She wanted so much more. What do you know about anything?" Herbert growled angrily. Why was the man kicking him while he was already down? "I know all about you and your type. You judge your daughter for making one mistake. Yes, it was a big mistake, and yes, everyone in town knew about it. She has almost died for that mistake. You have a granddaughter, you know. Her name is Annabelle, and she is the sweetest little girl on this earth. By denying your daughter, you are losing out on 3 generations of loving women. Your wife, your daughter, and your granddaughter." Herbert knew the man was right. He had no idea who he was, or how he knew all these things, but he was right about the fact that he was missing out. If I could go back and do things over, I'd do it differently. Of course, none of it mattered now. He was about to die, and there was no one left to mourn him. No one would care. You would? Would you accept your wife back if she stepped in this house? Would you allow your daughter to come back? Yes, I would. I've been so lonely without them. What is the purpose behind living if you have no one to live for? Herbert looked at the large pool of blood that was rapidly growing. The tablecloth may have slowed the bleeding, but it hadn't slowed it very much. I'm going to die, and they'll never know I loved them. He looked up at where the man had stood, but no one was there. I'm lying here imagining I'm seeing people. What is wrong with me? Oh, that's right. I'm dying. Amos was on the ladder, working on the barn roof again. Thankfully his mother had said nothing to him on their way back to town the day before. He wasn't sure if he could have controlled his temper if she had. As he worked, he noticed the stranger, who he hadn't seen since the morning Belle was born. He climbed down, looking the man in the eye. What can I do for you today? Your mother-in-law needs to go home, and she needs to do it fast. He's going to die otherwise. You take her there, and you keep writing for the doctor. The man disappeared before his eyes, which had always bothered Amos, but he'd never been able to stop the strange behavior. Amos knew the man wouldn't lie, though, and he ran for the house. Minerva. She came out of the kitchen, frowning at him. The baby's sleeping. What is your problem? I need to get you to your house. He's going to die otherwise. She frowned. Who's going to die? Herbert? Yes. I don't know what happened. I just know you need to be there immediately. I'm going to drop you off and then head for the doctor. Minerva picked up her skirts and ran. I'll let Becky know I'm leaving. I think she'll be just fine here alone, don't you? Yes, I do. I'll saddle the horse. He ran to the stable and quickly saddled his gelding. Minerva ran to the stable just as he was mounting his horse. He reached down a hand for her, and she stepped on his foot and swung up behind him. Hurry! The whole way to the ranch, she prayed constantly. She didn't know why she believed the urgency of what had happened, but she did. When they reached the ranch, she ran inside and found Herbert lying in a pool of his own blood. His face was pale, and his eyes were closed. She knew that Amos had ridden on for the doctor, and she was glad because she wasn't certain if she had the skills to keep her husband alive. She unwrapped the tablecloth from around his leg and saw how bad the wound was. Running for her sewing basket, she carefully sewed the biggest gash closed. Only you would use my best tablecloth to stop bleeding. That thing is never going to come clean. Herbert's eyes opened slightly. I knew you'd be mad. Hush, you. I'm going to stop this bleeding, no matter what it takes. Amos is writing for the doctor. She was determined to keep him alive, no matter what. You take care of me, Minerva. I don't want no doctor charging me more than my ranch is worth to sew my leg. Minerva shook her head. Only you would be worried about money at a time like this. You're about to bleed to death. I didn't want to die without you and Becky knowing. Knowing what? That you'll never forgive us? I think we've figured that out. Now, shoo. You need to save your strength. I'm not letting you die yet. She started to work on his foot, noting that the knife had gone clean through it. How had he managed to do so much damage to himself? Chapter 10. Amos rode fast and hard to get to the doctor's home for the second time in a month. When the doctor came to the door, his eyes widened. Becky again? No, her father. Hurry. Amos waited while the doctor saddled his own horse, and the two of them rode toward the Brown ranch together. When they reached the house, Amos dismounted with the doctor, not sure what they'd find when they got into the house. He knocked once and then opened the door, praying that it wasn't as bad as the stranger had made it seem. On the floor in the kitchen, he spotted his mother and father-in-law immediately. His father-in-law was as pale as Becky had been after Belle's birth, and his mother-in-law knelt beside him. He could see where she'd stitched him up, but there was a whole lot of blood everywhere. The doctor pushed him aside and knelt beside the injured man, his gaze taking in the stitches. "You did a good job on the stitches, Minerva. I know you used to be a midwife." "A nurse midwife," she said softly. "I've stitched up more people than I can count." "You're very good at what you do." The doctor looked at the foot. "I think there may be some tendon damage here, but we won't really know until he starts trying to walk on it. He thinks he's going to die. He would probably have bled out before I arrived if you hadn't come to stitch him." The doctor got to his feet. "Amos, would you help me get him into his bed?" Amos nodded. "Yes, of course." With Minerva leading the way, the two men carried Herbert up the stairs and put him in his bed. Once he was settled, the doctor looked between the other two. "Someone's going to have to stay with him." "That's my job," Minerva said softly. "Are you sure?" Amos asked. "I can hire someone from town to stay with him." "I'm sure. He wants to see Becky and Belle, too." Minerva had tears rolling down her cheeks as she told him about her husband's change of heart. "He wants me to come back as well." "Is that what you want?" Amos asked. He couldn't imagine anyone wanting to move back in with a man like his father-in-law, but if that was her desire, then he wouldn't question it. She nodded, her eyes shining happily. "He says he understands what he's done wrong, and he's willing to forgive. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life alone without us in it." "How can I help you before I go home to Becky?" he asked. He was starting to get worried at the sheer amount of time his wife had been home alone with the baby. He knew she was doing better, but what if something had happened? "Nothing. I'll take care of him." "Thank you so much, Amos. You've saved my daughter and now my husband. I don't know how we'll ever thank you." Minerva walked to him and drew him down, kissing his cheek. "You're a good son-in-law to me." Amos smiled. "Why don't I bring the baby and Becky over to see you both tomorrow? If you need any supplies, make me a list before we come, and we'll make a trip into town to get them." "Thank you, Amos. I'll do just that." The doctor smiled. "I'm glad to see everything ending up so well here. Amos, would you mind if I rode with you to see Becky? I was going to come out tomorrow anyway, and I'll just save myself from making the trip twice." "That would be great." "Thanks, document." Together, the two men rode at a much slower pace to the house he shared with his wife. When he walked in with the doctor, she raced to Amos. "My father? Is he all right?" Amos nodded. "He cut himself pretty badly, but your mother stitched him up. He's in bed resting, and he wants to see you and Belle tomorrow. Are you up for that?" "He wants to see us?" Tears rushed down Becky's cheeks. "Are you sure?" Your mother was very sure. "He said he didn't want to die alone, and he needed to see you and the baby." She wrapped her arms around Amos and wept, so happy to hear that her father no longer blamed her for ruining him and for her mother leaving. "Are he and Mama going to be all right?" "Yes, they seem to be just fine. Your father was still unconscious, but Minerva said they'd worked everything out." "I'm so glad." She sniffled and wiped her tears with her apron. "What must you think of me, Dr. JT?" The doctor laughed. "I think you're a woman who just had a baby." He patted her arm. "You have a right to be emotional. Would you mind if I examined you tonight instead of tomorrow? It will save me the ride out here." "Of course not." 20 minutes later, the doctor was on his way. "Are you sure you won't stay for supper?" Becky asked. She'd made enough to feed 3 people, and her mother was obviously not coming back that night. "No, thank you. Nora will have supper waiting for me. I need to get home to my wife and children." JT smiled when he mentioned his family, and Amos certainly understood why. The man was as in love with his new wife as Amos was with his own. After supper that evening, Amos led Becky into the parlor. "It seems strange for it to be just us and the baby. Your mother has been with us since she was born." Becky nodded, settling onto the sofa with him, her head on his shoulder. I really appreciate all the help she's given us, but I'm so glad she's back home where she belongs. With my father. So am I. I'm ready for it to just be our family. Me, my wife, and our beautiful daughter. I can't tell you how grateful I am to you for the way you stuck up for me with your mother. The things she said hurt a great deal, and you didn't let her keep saying them. Thank you. I meant every word I said to her. She cannot talk that way about my wife and daughter. I love you both so very much that I can't imagine what I would do without the two of you at my side. I thought you'd just said that to your mother, to try to get her to leave me alone. Becky looked at him with love shining from her own eyes. I think I knew I loved you before your mother ever came to stay the first time. You're an awfully special man, Amos Bowen. His eyes widened, and a slow grin crossed his face. You mean it? You really love me? I really love you. She leaned forward and brushed his lips with hers. I guess that means that we can have a real marriage as soon as the doctor tells us it's all right. When will that be? He was already anxious for the time he could hold her and be one with her. Another 3 weeks, most likely. He may stretch it out a little longer than that, but he says I'm getting stronger every day, and he knows I'm going to be just fine. I'm glad to hear that. Amos leaned down and kissed her, lingering over it. I love you so much. I knew from the moment I set eyes on you in that boarding house that you were meant to be mine. She laughed. You thought I was married to someone else. I was going to take him out, so you'd be mine. You're crazy, Amos, but I love you that way. Becky was nervous as she got herself and Belle ready to go to her parents the following morning. She hadn't spoken to her father since the day she'd told him she was expecting, and he'd made it very clear he had no intention of speaking with her again. When she was finally ready, she dressed the baby in her new gown that she'd just finished the night before. Her mother had made most of the baby's clothes, but she was proud to bring her child in something she herself had made. Amos hitched up the team and hurried back inside to escort his wife and daughter to the wagon. He carried Belle, not wanting Becky to overtax herself on their outing. Are you nervous? She nodded. I'm so afraid that he'll have changed his mind by the time we get there. He's always been very rigid, but I was his little girl, and he made it clear that he loved me more than anything. I want my father back. I understand. He seemed very unbending when I met him, but perhaps he really did have a change of heart. I hope so. He handed Becky up into the wagon before giving her the baby. We'll know in a few minutes. When they got to the house, Becky was shaking, she was so nervous. She prayed that her father wouldn't have changed his mind, and he would still accept her. She felt terrible for letting him down, but she couldn't regret the baby in her arms. She waited for Amos to take the baby and help her down. Though she wanted to run into the house, she walked sedately into the only home she'd ever known less than a year before. So much had changed in the past year that it was as if she was a completely different person. Her mother was waiting in the kitchen, and when Becky saw her face, she knew that everything really was all right. How is he? He's hurting, but he's changed. You'll find him more forgiving. I don't know what happened, or how it happened, but he wants to see you and the baby. He's been waiting for you all morning. May I go up? Becky was so excited to see him. She wanted to show her father her beautiful baby and tell him about the time she'd been away. She needed to tell him about the boarding house and his beautiful granddaughter. Hopefully her mother was right, and he'd want to listen to her. She walked up the stairs, aware that Amos was right behind her, carrying the baby. She would still have to be careful for a while, and he was working hard not to fatigue her. Her parents' bedroom door was open, but she knocked on the door anyway. Papa? He looked at her, and she knew she'd been forgiven. His blue eyes were sparkling, and his smile was bigger than she'd ever seen. Did you bring the baby? He asked. She nodded. Amos is carrying her. I'm still supposed to take it easy. She sat down on the bed beside her father. Have you met my husband, Amos? He shook his head. Not while I was in my right mind, I haven't. It's nice to meet you, Amos. Thank you for taking good care of all 3 of my girls. It's been my pleasure, sir. Amos handed the baby to Becky, and she held little Belle where her grandfather could see her. This is Annabelle. We call her Belle, which means beauty. It seems to suit her so well. Her father grimaced as he moved closer to her to see the baby. She looks just like you did at her age. Definitely a beauty. Becky smiled. I'm sorry I messed up, Papa. I'm so glad to see you again. I'm sorry I was so rigid. I love you so much, and when I thought you were ruining your life, something inside me just broke. I need to remember that none of us is perfect, and we're all human. Her father's arm wrapped around her, and she buried her face in his shoulder, crying. Amos stood by, wanting to help, but understanding this was a moment between father and daughter, and he had no business there. He looked up and caught the eye of the stranger across the room, who smiled at him before fading from view. Whoever the man was. Angel or ghost. He'd saved lives, and for that, Amos was grateful. Amos crept down the stairs, not wanting to intrude, and he sat down at the kitchen table. Almost immediately, the stranger was there with him. Happy now? The man asked him. I'm very happy. I do have one question for you, though. What's that? Why did you tell me she needed to fall in love with me before the baby was born? Amos asked. Because she needed to have that love to cling to during the dark hours when she almost died. Without her love for you, she would have just drifted away. So she really did love me then? The stranger nodded. Of course she did. I won't see you again, Amos. You're ready to be on your own now. Amos frowned. If I need you, will you come? There'll never be a need for me, you get to live happily ever after. With those words, the man faded from view, but Amos knew he'd always remember him and the help he'd given him.